This is James Arnold Taylor, voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Welcome to a more civilized podcast. This is the podcast you're looking for. You may not go about your business. Stay here, listen, and then move along.
Hello there, listeners. I'm tired.
And I'm not quite so tired.
Hello, tired and not so tired. I'm Dad.
The funny thing is, he's not. So
That's true.
That is true.
Of the three of us.
Oh, boy. Well, we have some things to say today, I think.
Well, one of us has things to say today.
I mean, I'm sure you guys will be able to chime in and agree on a lot of these things. But
I mean, that's about what we're going to be doing. We're going to be the backup singers here, the doo-wop boys.
it's another Chris episode.
Yeah.
But sir, the episode length. I'll do my best, everyone.
But before we get into that, Ross, I believe you have some news.
Nope. We have some.
He does not.
News.
He has Star Wars news, as far as I'm aware.
Newsy news.
I hate you so
The
much.
newsiest ever. All right, we actually have a handful of things to go over today, which is surprising. A bushel indeed.
Yes.
First, for all of us that are enjoying our at-home time, Disney has released...
For those of you who have extra at-home time.
Yes. No, not me. But
yeah.
for those of you that are at home, Episode 9 has been released on paid streaming services.
Not on Disney Plus yet.
Not on Disney Plus yet, although it has been reported that way.
It will be pretty soon, though.
Well, I haven't been able to find any actual details. Everyone's assuming it will, and I'm kind of in that camp, but there's not been any official word from Disney. But it is currently up on like Amazon Prime, and I noticed on the PlayStation Store and
it was like
a couple others.
4 or 6 days earlier or something. I don't remember what it was. Nobody knew when it was coming out in the first place because nobody cared. So
No, I mean, they had announced that it was going to be on like the 17th, I think was the original date, but it did
pushed back till the 27th, I believe.
No, it was pushed forward to like the 13th or something.
Because
but the DVD release is still like the 27th.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. So streaming was like, I guess it was just a week early, and then or 2 weeks early, however days work.
Math is hard.
And then the physical copies are still coming out later.
Speaking of the physical copies,
what about it? Oh,
Ross, you totally blew that perfect segue.
It was hardly a perfect segue.
That was pretty solid, actually. That was...
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
It was such a left turn from the flow of conversation. A perfect segue is smooth.
It was smooth. Segued us right into talking
sorry,
about the DVD.
I got a rule in Kyler's favor here.
Whatever.
So that was a solid segue.
You dropped it, Ross. It was a perfect
I mean,
pass.
I was also confused because I wasn't looking ahead on the list like he was. But
I wasn't either.
Oh,
So there we go.
slackers.
That's why it was so abrupt. It's because I wasn't ready for it. The Rise of Skywalker DVD will not have deleted scenes. They're just not going to do it.
Yeah, big tear. Moving on.
Um,
Wait, that's a light at the end of the tunnel, guys. There's less Rise of Skywalker on the DVD than we initially anticipated.
Well, and I'm trying to think what will be on it because, like,
I don't know.
There wasn't a director's
There's not a
commentary.
Yeah.
And
there are some featurettes, like making of stuff, that have released with the digital that I've heard about and don't really care.
Yeah. But, like, I don't know. I mean, it just feels like all the way around, Disney doesn't even care.
I think
it's just,
I think they're kind of cutting their losses. I don't know. I mean, not necessarily cutting their losses, releasing it early. Like, there are a lot of people like, oh yeah, they're releasing it early for all the people who are stuck at home. And I was like, no, I buy that with Frozen 2. Like, that was way early.
Mm-hmm.
But with this, it's like they moved it up a week to conveniently catch a ton of people staying at home for a movie that was going to underperform expectations.
Yeah.
I mean, initial expectations. Obviously, expectations have adjusted since the theatrical run, but
yeah. We'll see what happens.
yeah.
Anyway, next we have more fixing / ruining of old explanations. JJ has recently been asked and made a comment about Rey's parentage.
Ross wastes my beautiful intro to this news piece.
It's the one you use every time you have one.
And it's funny every time. J.J. Abrams makes Rise of Skywalker worse by trying to make it better.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
And it's accurate.
Yeah, well, but that's the thing. It's not just JJ. It's basically everyone
I know. That's why I reused it.
The film. Let's see. Let me get to the right part of the article. Speaking with Academy screening last week, Abrams has since addressed why he and writer Chris Terrio chose to effectively retcon that element of the story. Speaking of Rey's parentage.
Sorry, never mind.
He says, I think one of the themes of The Last Jedi is that anyone can be anything regardless of where you're from, which it was.
Which it was.
No, I love that he used the words "I think" because The Rise of Skywalker makes it pretty clear that J.J. Abrams and Chris Terrio didn't understand The Last Jedi in the slightest.
And it's true. That's exactly one of the messages of Rise of Skywalker, and I would argue it is my favorite, and I think it's the best message of not Rise of Skywalker, of Last Jedi.
Yeah. He continues, and I don't know if it resonates for everyone, but I think there are quite a few people who appreciate that idea of not coming from a place that you're not particularly excited about following or proud of. Man, that guy can put a bunch of words in a sentence.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And continuing on across the ad. And though I completely understand your nobody is a devastating thing, to me, the most painful, the most shocking thing was the idea that you're from the worst possible place.
You mean like Luke Skywalker was in the original trilogy? Because we've already been there and done that. Thanks, JJ.
Yep. I will, I have no comments because that's what this episode will be, is why that doesn't work.
Comments.
So we'll get into that.
I can't wait to hear it, honestly.
Yeah.
I'm going to try and be nice. Like, at least as nice as I was with Rogue One. So
yeah.
we'll see if I manage it.
I'm sure you've already tuned out, but see you next time, Ryan.
2 weeks from now, or a week from now, though, he'll have a good one.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
I think he really actually will probably enjoy that one.
Yeah. Anyway, on to bigger and better news. We have rumors that may or may not be confirmed, depending on if you believe certain sources, of another actress that will be appearing in The Mandalorian. So, we have some news coming out of the WWE world that what's her name?
Sasha Banks.
Sasha Banks, apparently a WWE superstar, will be in this next upcoming season of The Mandalorian. This is coming from Mat Men Pro Wrestling, which I don't know what that is, and it's apparently confirmed by Pro Wrestling Sheet's Ryan Satin.
Well, I mean,
Cool.
if we have the authority of Ryan Satin behind this.
Yeah, I'm sure that these are people who know stuff about wrestling.
Yeah.
Ryan Satin, that's a real person, right?
Well, and
It's a name.
I for a minute there had to double take and look at the name and make sure it wasn't Satan. Ryan Satan.
Ryan Satin?
Satine, yes.
There we go. Then this guy knows about wrestling and Star Wars.
Yeah.
But this is being also re-reported by IGN, so IGN's reputable enough. So that's why we're talking about it. So yeah, we'll see. I don't know anything about this woman. I'm sure if she's in there, she'll be competent at least.
Hopefully.
And that'll be interesting. And then in more casting news, also about
big news.
Mandalorian, which I'm sure you've all heard by now, we might be getting Ahsoka Tano in season 2.
Not might be. It's a real thing. It's official. She has been cast.
That still feels so weird that I just can't quite accept it.
But it's there. So she's been talking about this for a couple of years where she's like, I'd be down to play Ahsoka.
Yeah.
And I remember when she first said this, and then it kind of, got a little flutter on the internet. My wife and I, were looking at her face and stuff, her facial features, and we were like, actually,
it could definitely work.
That's really close.
Yeah.
Like, it would definitely work. And so since she's been a fan of this idea for a long time, I'm happy with it.
She's a heck of an actress.
She is a
I'm
heck
on
of an
board with
actress.
putting Rosario Dawson anywhere at all.
What else has she been in?
Rent, and that's the first thing that was
Daredevil.
in my mind. Daredevil
she
is
was
great.
Daredevil?
Yeah, she's the nurse that saves him in that first season.
Yeah.
Oh, I haven't seen the TV series.
So
I thought you were
Daredevil
talking
and
about the
Luke
movies.
Cage. Oh yeah, no. The good Daredevil.
The good,
Which is why she's not much in season 2, because season 2 wasn't great. But
not as good nearly.
I've also heard that she is impressively picky about the projects she takes on, so I'm hoping that implies good things for the script for that episode at least.
Yeah,
episodes,
they did say that it was going to be basically like a cameo.
Yeah. They said it was a guest role.
Yeah, a guest role. So she'll be in a couple of episodes, I think.
Most,
but which I'm happy for.
Yeah, I'm never crazy
don't
about
want
bringing
to
in established
see-
characters.
Yeah, well, not just that either, but like, I want to see The Mandalorian as the star of
Yes.
The Mandalorian. And although definitely love Ahsoka, definitely on board and excited for Rosario Dawson, like, I still want to explore The Mandalorian and see his life, his decisions, see what he's doing in the galaxy, you know, and that's why we showed up in the first place to The Mandalorian, so I don't want to lose that, you know.
I agree.
But yeah, I'm excited for it. I think she's going to do a great job. She definitely looks the part already in her face. Like, she's got those really nice cheekbones. That
she's
Ahsoka
definitely got
has
the
and stuff. Like,
structure.
she's going to be great. The only sad thing is, and I'm like, you know, I can see both sides of this, because we've already talked about Rosario Dawson. She's going to do great. I do feel bad for Ashley Eckstein, who is Ahsoka, and it's like, you know, and then there's like, well, maybe they'll voice over Rosario Dawson, but then I'm like, well, but I don't know how that would work either.
Someone pointed out that, like, well, I mean, we didn't have Hayden Christensen
and that was the
McGregor
deciding factor for me. I was like,
cartoon,
that's
so,
true,
like,
and you know, it turned out fine. So it'll just be, you know, like young Alden Ehrenreich playing young Han Solo. We're just going to wave our hands and say, well, the voice doesn't sound right, but it is who it is, and that's just how it's going to be.
Well, and there would be no point in casting anyone but Ashley Eckstein because she obviously could play the role.
Yeah.
And so if there's no point in doing it if you're not going to have Rosario Dawson do the whole job.
Which I'm surprised they didn't go that route.
She's going to do makeup herself. She's going to do everything, all the stuff.
Make her own costume. Yeah, but she's going to do great. I'm really looking forward to that. I've liked her in everything that I've seen her in, so.
You know, but what do you think the discussion was in not having Ashley Eckstein do it?
Rosario Dawson is a big name.
Yeah,
I think that's a big draw for a lot of people, especially given that Mandalorian currently is their best wide draw Star Wars property.
And also, just straight up, Rosario Dawson looks more like Ahsoka than Ashley Eckstein does.
I could see that either
That's
way.
fair.
But
And has she done anything live action, or is she just strictly a voice actress?
I don't think she's done anything live action.
Give me
I
a
don't
moment.
think so.
Let me see.
Yeah. Chris is gonna check IMDb or something, but I can't think of anything she's done live action. Not in any major way, anyway.
Yeah. Do you know of other roles besides Ahsoka?
She was in Sydney White with Amanda Bynes.
Oh, okay. Like I said, not anything major.
Yes. I'm not really seeing much of anything else.
And I know she's been incredibly busy with her universe. Because basically,
she
when
was
Clone Wars
a
shut
guest
down,
star in Drake and Josh.
Oh boy, really? Wow.
And that 70s show. But yeah, no, like one episode. That's not bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, because basically once Clone Wars ended, she started her universe thing where it was like Star Wars line of clothing, and she's basically just been doing that since.
When it's actually,
and then came back to reprise Ahsoka, obviously, for season 7. But
when that was announced, that her universe stuff was announced, I've actually been impressed with what they've been doing.
Yeah, it's surprisingly cool.
I also do think Disney has an active interest in trying to separate the characters from any one specific actor, just because that limits their ability to cast them in the future
for franchise longevity. Yeah. Sure.
So that makes sense, but
still,
yeah.
Yep.
Anyway, that is our newsiest news. And Kylie, you want to go get some lunch?
Yeah.
No, I can't do this without you guys.
Chris,
we do have one more thing to announce, though.
Oh, yes. We do have one more bit of really super newsy news.
Yeah.
The newsy news. It's very newsy.
The crowning jewel. The Kyber crystal.
Tyler, give us some newsy news.
I will not. I refuse. There has been something that we have talked about literally since before this podcast had started. And then we said, well, let's see how this goes.
We'll
come back to it. And then in a couple weeks, we're going to have a guest on who Chris and I met at LTUE, and one of the things she very lovingly chastised me for doing a garbage job with our social media et al. And one of the things she said we should be doing is doing a Patreon. She's like, because you guys, you sound pretty awesome. I've seen you guys talking here. You guys are definitely personable and stuff. People might want to support you. So why aren't you doing that? And I said, well, we kind of talked about it. And she said, yeah, but that's not doing it. Why aren't you doing it? And I was like, okay. So we have been working for a couple weeks on actually putting meat on the skeleton of this idea. And we have a Patreon. It is patreon.com, of course, /more civilized.
You will be able to find links at all our social media.
Yes, it's true.
Probably pinned in places where they'll be easy to find.
Yep. And we have a few tiers, 4 to be specific. For $5 a month, you can become a kind of adequate patron.
Ooh.
And what you get with that is the long-promised 2019 Valentine's Day episode, as we intended to release it. The director's cut, if you will.
Yes.
You will also get access to certain unedited episodes. We're not going to do every week episode in there, but occasionally we'll be like, yeah, that one I can have. But then also we're going to do some bonus episodes. We have some fun ideas planned for what those little bonus episodes could be. They won't be the really long weekly episodes. They'll be little things, and they'll be pretty darn funny. So you'll get all that for just $5 a month. For $10 a month,
What should we call those other episodes?
I don't know.
Nerfiest Nuggets?
No, stop it. Stop it. I will hate you forever.
I'm sold. Nerfiest Nuggets.
So for $10 a month, you can become an adequate patron. And I'm assuming every one of you understands how Patreon and the internet work, where if there's like lower level tiers and you go higher, you get the lower level stuff. So I'm not going to say that with every one of these. Know that that's in there. So you will get to participate in AMCP AMAs.
Ooh.
More civilized AMAs. So you will be able to submit the questions at this level, and then you'll be able to see the answers to them. Or if we do like a video or an audio recording or however it is that we're going to do them, you get the answers.
We're going to play it loosey-goosey.
Loosey-goosey, yeah. Exactly. And then also, you will be eligible for an episode dedication. So what we want to do, just as an extra thank you to those of you who are donating at this level or above, is start dedicating each episode every week to one of you.
We'll try and be nice about it, too. Like,
yes.
An episode like this wouldn't be dedicated to Ryan Farron or something. It's not his wheelhouse.
Yeah,
we're not gonna dedicate a video game episode.
But
to
this
Kelsey
episode might, go well for Steven.
Yeah.
Anyway.
We will, however, dedicate ironic episodes to Steven. Absolutely,
for sure. Yeah. Then we get for $15 a month is the more adequate patron.
Ooh.
So you get live streams with us, like once a month. We'll do some sort of live stream. Yeah. And after 12 months at this level, you will get a item from our merch store, whatever
free piece
you
of
want.
Swag.
Yeah, whatever you want to pick, you'll get it.
Yes. And when we say live streams, we mean we're going to start streaming games and bring people on, among other things, right?
Yeah.
'Cause that was one of the ideas.
Yeah, or like if we just want to like record a video of us doing
if we're at some Star Wars related
yeah.
thing back when in the sometime in the future when events start happening again.
Yeah. In the year 2042 when coronavirus is done.
Yeah.
So then that's a thing, and we may add more things to these tiers later, but this is what we're starting with. And then for $20 a month, you become the most adequate patron. Oh, and speaking of things in our merch store, after 6 months at this level, you get a free thing in the store, but also we're going to be adding more things to the store. We already have some things like adequate listener, #adequate listener things. We're going to be adding some other really fun things that we kind of brainstormed some ideas, and they're pretty funny. I told Steven, shout out to you, bud. But I told Steven today at the tournament that we're going to do, one of the shirts is going to be Fact Check Us, Steven. He enjoyed that. Another one, and this is the one I'm tempted to send to people, is I supported
I supported a more civilized
podcast, and all I got was this lousy t-shirt, Anyway, there's going to be some ideas to go check that out. And also, at this level, is where you can request that we do an episode on a specific topic, and we will do it because you're paying us to do it. And also, if it is feasible, then you can also come on the show for that topic.
With the caveat, of course, that the topic they request must be in some way Star Wars related.
Well, yeah, for sure.
Yes.
I was going to say, so we can't do an episode on Spice Girls. And I was like, well, Spice is in Star Wars.
Episode comparing the Spice Girls and the Knights of Ren.
Yeah, oh, that's an episode.
This is actually
right there.
already a thing that exists on the internet.
my gosh.
So
Wow.
they took the descriptions from the visual dictionary, and it's like, these are basically just the Spice Girls. It's like, here's the sporty one.
Now, we have in the past people like Ryan Farron come on the show anyway because they had a really great idea. So I'm not saying that if you're not donating $20 a month that you can't
Yeah.
ever come on the show, that door is
We
closed.
will still invite people who
like
haven't.
yeah,
done
like
it.
if it's appropriate, sure. But if you want to guarantee that your idea gets heard, and if you want to guarantee yourself a spot on this show for an episode, then that's the way to do it. So for right now, that's what we have: $5, $10, $15, and $20 a month. Please go sign up and give us money so that we can afford to do better things with this show.
Yeah.
And that address is, again,
Is
patreon.com/more
civilized. I don't think capitalization matters, but if it does, the M and
No,
the
it should
C
not.
are capitalized.
Should not matter.
Yeah, I
in
don't
the
think it
URL.
matters, but there it is. More civilized. So go do it.
Make sure the numbers are capitalized if they're capitalized. Like, that's important. But
Ross actually stopped to think about it for a minute.
No, I was still considering the capitalization of the web address because that usually does make a difference, but I think Patreon was probably smart enough to redirect
it
properly.
used to. But yeah, they generally steered away from it these days, as far as I understand.
If
but
I can
haven't
make a
looked into this in
personal
years.
appeal here,
No.
I really want to do the AMAs, so go do that one.
That'll be fun.
And those AMAs don't have to be Star Wars related, by the
That's
way.
true,
That's
yeah.
literally
It
anything
wouldn't
is
be an
anything.
AMA if it was
Yeah.
Star Wars related.
So there you go.
That would be an AMAASW. So,
Sure.
ASWR. Ask me anything Star Wars related.
I was going to say, ask me anything about Star Wars.
Oh,
But that works
yeah,
too.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, after that bit of acronymity,
Nice.
yeah,
I like it.
like that.
Acronymity.
Too many letters going around, guys.
It's all right.
letters.
It's all part of my adequatulence, Ross.
Yes, thanks. Something, something, automatopoeia, something, something, something.
Yeah, sure.
I was just thinking the biggest word I could think of.
It's a good word.
Yeah,
Sounds nice.
sure.
All right. So today we are revisiting the topic of Rise of Skywalker. We mentioned in our original Rise of Skywalker review that at some point we wanted to do an episode where we had people who liked it give us the reasons they liked it, and we addressed those. Probably will still do that in the future. I've got a friend who's going to come on and try and argue in its behalf. But I also got looking at those and was just like, I know I'm going to have enough to say that to fill an episode, and I don't want to be barreling over our viewers who are giving us things or guests that are coming on, so why don't we just get this out of the way? Also, I'm hoping it comes across a little gentler that way. Like, I'm not trying to be mean to anyone, but yeah, there are some things about this movie that it's hard to discuss without it seeming rather mean, especially if it's someone saying, well, here's my opinion on this. And so I figured, hey, if I just put this all down now, it's a little less harsh if it's not directly addressing a specific
so
person.
for those of you who enjoy Rise of Skywalker, an episode is coming up in the future, nearish future,
More than
where
one,
we've
actually.
got where we've got a couple people coming on to say, hey, this is why it was actually
yeah, but I'm
good.
saying we'll be doing more than one.
And honestly, again, if any of you out there are have compelling reasons why it's a good movie, please share them with me. I don't like disliking
luck.
Star Wars. Yeah. I don't like disliking Star Wars. I would love for somebody to come along like Chris did with Last Jedi for me and be like, hey, here's a reasonable explanation for why this is good. I am always open to listening to your reasonings.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and like I said with Rise of Skywalker, like I've said many times, you can like whatever you want. My goal here is not to make anyone dislike Rise of Skywalker, though I do lean a little more that way with Rise of Skywalker than I ever did with Rogue One. But no, it's like you can like what you like, but the thing is that liking something isn't the same as that something being good. Just like something being good doesn't mean you have to like it. Those are two separate qualities. And I've heard and read a lot of stuff from people who are just flabbergasted that Rise of Skywalker has the lowest critic score of any of the Star Wars movies on Rotten Tomatoes. And I'm just kind of like, well, I mean, it seems pretty obvious to me, but I'm happy to explain. I'll go through this, and it's just like, I'm not trying to be mean, but it's just like from a critical perspective, from a writer's perspective, this is why Rise of Skywalker really does not hold up as well as even the prequels. So, and I will say, it's like, I do not think this movie is, one of my complaints about it is that it is not very intelligent. That does not mean I think people who like it are unintelligent. That just means that that there is a lot of not thinking in this movie. I have a lot of people try and get me to like it by saying, oh, it's fine if you just turn your brain off and like it. And I'm like, well, that's, I think, kind of why it's working, is because you've turned your brain off there to enjoy it, which is fine. It's not something I do. I don't like doing it. If I have to not think about something to like it, then I just won't like it, period. Which isn't to say that I don't like a lot of, dumb fun stuff. I love Pacific Rim, but Pacific Rim is a solidly made dumb movie, and Rise of Skywalker is not solidly made.
Along this point, so this is something that I have argued with Kent from Bacon Sale about, where he's like, oh, all the Marvel movies are just terrible. They're just total fluff. They're dumb. And I'm like, well, yes.
There's a lot of fluff.
There's a lot of fluff. I think, but he's saying, like, they're no Inception or something like that. That really, like, challenges you, makes you think, and so they're not good. And I'm like, okay, well, yes, and that's true. They are those things. But I compared it to, like, mac and cheese. So, like, I've had various, gourmet mac and cheeses. My sister, who's in Indiana, she makes a really tasty mac and cheese. Mm-hmm. And I recognize that there are lots of mac and cheeses out there that are, like, made with 5 real cheeses and cream and all this good stuff. And objectively, yes, they are a superior, superlative mac and cheese. Yeah. But sometimes I just want blue box Kraft mac and cheese, highly processed, fake as it gets out there, and it just hits the spot.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's kind of like the Marvel movie versus, like, an Inception. You don't want, like, a really heavy, intense thing every single time.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Well, and to take that metaphor further, it's like, yeah, I love me some good, just blue box Kraft mac and cheese. Make it for my boys all the time. We all love it. My wife can't have gluten, so she's just screwed. But, but at the same time, if you're going to tell me, it's like, yeah, we're just going to have some good blue box Kraft mac and cheese, and then you give me some crappy Western Family knockoff, oof, it does not taste like Kraft mac and cheese. And some people will try and tell you it does, and it doesn't. It's made with even more inferior ingredients, and some people genuinely can't tell the difference, but that doesn't mean there isn't a difference. And it's like, yeah, if you're going to give me blue box, that's great. Give it to me. But don't try and pass off a crappier knockoff as that. And that's the difference for me, is it's like, yeah, this just isn't well made. I did have a quick note here that I wanted to get out of the way at the beginning, just because it crops up a lot in a lot of people's comments about why this is good. A note on rhyming. A lot of people try to justify what this movie does by pointing out similarities to other episodes and quoting George Lucas about everything in Star Wars rhyming and how great that is. And here's the thing. Rhyming or mirroring in storytelling is a tool writers can use to add depth and meaning to a character or scene by drawing a clear comparison with a character or scene that came before. It's a means to an end, not an end in and of itself. Like, imagine someone building a crappy house and expecting you to be impressed and pleased because they used a hammer to build it. It's like, oh, I used a hammer, though. Look at all the hammering I did in this. That makes it good. It's like, no, it doesn't. It's a tool. And it's a basic tool at that. Like, my sister's a professional illustrator, and I once listened to her explain how symmetry is super overused and poorly used by novice artists in visual illustrating. A lot of people instinctively go for symmetry in images without understanding that it usually spoils or divides the focus of the picture. Asymmetry in an image allows the artist to better direct the viewer's focus and create a more engaging image. And symmetry should really be used carefully by people who understand how it's used to create a still visually engaging picture without marring the principles of focus and such. And it's the same thing in writing. It's all about message and meaning. That's what mirroring is all about. And mirroring just for the sake of rhyme will actually make a weaker story that says things you don't intend. Because mirroring is all about drawing comparisons, and if a lot of people will draw comparisons that they didn't mean to and say things they didn't intend to. So, yes, that's nice that Star Wars often rhymes, but if you're doing it without understanding the point of rhyming, then you might as well not be doing it. That doesn't actually make it better. So, most things that I've heard, it's been, 3 months now since Rise of Skywalker came out.
Yeah.
I've heard a lot of things. I mean, I spent a good chunk of the end of December and beginning of January actively looking through people's positive things about it, looking for anything that I felt held up even remotely. And I have found one or two that I was like, okay, that's actually a bit more valid. That does change how I see the scene. But for the most part, they really don't hold up, and for the same pattern of reasons. Number one, that they have to ignore portions of the movie for that interpretation to work. It's just like, you know what? It's like, here, this is the message of this movie, isn't it great? And it's like, okay, but that's contradicted by all these points in the movie. It's like, well, but that's, it's the point of this character's story. It's like, okay, but that's contradicted by these points in that character's story. Like, it's still not a clear, and it's not a clear message. It's contradicted. But, okay, say you do ignore all that. Let's just say we were ignoring all of that. Even then, there's usually pieces missing. Like, it's like we're saying, oh, this message is saying this. It's just, it's this kind of storyline. It's this familiar plot arc. And it's like, okay, so this is, you're saying this is the plot arc where the character is this, and then they learn a lesson about this and become this. At what point in the movie did they learn a lesson? They actually didn't. There isn't that there. It's like, oh, right here, I've used with Rogue One, I used the example of Kirk in J.J. Abrams' 2009 Star Trek, and I picked that one for a reason here. It's J.J. Abrams. This is a problem with a lot of his writing, is that, a lot of people point at that, and it's like, oh yeah, this is a story about, Kirk is arrogant, and then he learns some humility, and it makes him into the commander he needs to be. And it's like, except when did he learn humility? He never did. Yeah. People point out the scene where, he got banished to this planet, the ice planet, and it's like, yeah, but he never learned any humility there. Nothing there was about Kirk learning anything except exposition. In fact, Spock explicitly told him, it's like, oh, no, you should have been in charge all along. You're right. There was no humility. They're right that that's the point in this sort of arc where he should have learned that. The writers just didn't actually stick it in there at any point. And that happens a lot, where it's usually people adding in things based on what this sort of plot usually should be, usually instinctively because they've seen a lot of movies, but it's not actually in there. But okay, again, if we just ignore all the stuff that doesn't work, we pretend that the stuff that does work is actually there, even then, you're usually left with a pretty cliche plot that isn't a very good example of the cliche. Like, that's the problem with doing things that are cliche, is it's not really that there's something wrong with the plot. It's often just that this plot has been done so many times, and often done so well, that if you try to do it just straight up, beat by beat, what that cliche is, you're gonna inevitably be inferior to a lot of what's come before. And that's the case with a lot of these stories where people give me, it's like, oh, this, and it's like, okay, even if I just ignore all the things that don't work about that, it's still not very good. And even worse, it's not only something that's been done better before in other places, it's almost always something that's been done better by Star Wars. And if that's the case, what's the point of doing it again in Star Wars if we're just going to do the same thing but worse? So my favorite example of all of these points in action so Tor.com is owned by Tor Books, does a lot of opinion pieces, and they had one where they're like, okay, we acknowledge that Rise of Skywalker is really not that well made. I like Forbes' description of it, actually. This is basically as close to an objectively bad piece of media as you can get.
Wow.
Yeah, it was great. But they said, but here's some good stuff in Rise of Skywalker, and the main thrust of the article, they ran it in late December, and then again just recently reposted it, was about how Rey's story is one of nonviolent resistance. They quoted a line from I believe it's Michael Stackpole's, and the look that Ross is already giving us is one that I'm sure a lot of people are going to give us as we go through this. They quoted a line from the Revenge of the Sith novelization. It's actually a really great line. I like it. It's something along the lines of, the Clone Wars were the perfect Jedi trap. Like, Jedi were peacekeepers, they weren't soldiers, and they didn't lose it because they lost the Clone War. They lost the moment they decided to engage in war as soldiers rather than being peacekeepers. It is actually a great line. He worded it better than I did. Mm-hmm. And I like the idea that it's like the Jedi are about peace, and when they engaged in war, even if it was a justified decision, they had already lost. And so they highlighted that, and they're like, yeah, Rey's story is one about passive, non-violent resistance, and how you don't have to be a violent person in order to resist evil. And they're like, if you look at the movie, every time that Rey, all her worst points, her lowest points are where she engages in violence. It's when she decides to attack Kylo Ren. It's when even earlier, it's when she loses her patience in the training exercise and drops a tree on top of BB-8. It's when she attacks Kylo Ren and gets angry and ends up giving away her position. It's when she attacks Kylo Ren and ends up stabbing him when that's not a thing she wanted to do. And all her best moments in this movie are when she chooses a non-violent path, a non-violent solution. She chooses to heal the snake instead of just fighting it, and that gets them what they needed. It ends up opening their exit out. She chooses to... She has her lowest moment where she accidentally stabs someone in anger that she didn't mean to, and then she chooses a better path. She sees the light, and she is able to redeem herself and pick herself up out of that low point by choosing nonviolence, sacrificing some of her own life force to heal her enemy. And then at the end, she chooses a non-violent approach to dealing with Palpatine. She doesn't beat him by being violent. She beats him by standing her ground and not being violent, and it's his lust for violence that ends up destroying him. And I'm sure tons of our listeners are listening to this going, well, that doesn't hold up, because it really doesn't. So first, you have to ignore portions of the movie. It's like, Rey chose not to be violent with the snake. She was also very violent with several stormtroopers on the way to that snake. Mm-hmm. And she and her friends were all violent there, and it wasn't really presented as a negative thing in any way. I don't really think it can be negative when there's that many woos going on about it. And there's no negative consequences there. Even more like she blows up the ship and with that supposedly had Chewie on it, and it's like, yes, it is presented as a negative thing, but only because Chewie was on it. Like, nobody's really concerned with the dozens of lives she actually did snuff out there.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that a movie needs to be concerned with every mook and background. Like, yeah, it's a war, violence happens, but if this is a story,
but if the argument you're making is non-violence, then the fact that she casually murdered people, felt bad about it for accidentally killing her friend, but then was like, oh, my buddy's alive. Oh, well, cool then. Mm-hmm. That was totally fine. That does not hold with your argument. Yeah.
And especially, that at the end there, it's like, oh yeah, she's non-violent at the end, except for that part where she passed a lightsaber to her buddy Kylo, and then
so he could butcher his own friends.
And then they slaughtered a dozen people. Yeah, like it's like that right in the middle of that, there's a massive slaughter. And I'm not surprised they forgot it. It was very unnoticeable, as we discussed in the lightsaber duels episode. Very forgettable, but it's like, it was there. Like, it's really hard to claim that she was taking some moral non-violent high ground when she slaughtered 6 people.
It would be really interesting, too, because I don't think that's going to hold up in court. Like, if I give Ross a handgun and he goes and butchers a bunch of people with it, and then the judge is like, hey, Kyler, that was your handgun. I'm like, yeah, well, but see, I'm non-violent.
Yeah.
I just gave the weapon to my buddy.
Yeah, exactly.
With the express knowledge of what he was going to go do.
Well, and she was fighting people at the same time too. She was fighting like Sith guards or whatever. And
but it's like, it would be like if I'm like, oh, Ross, you need to kill people. Well, here, have my gun then. I mean, I'm not going to kill anybody.
Yes,
but like
exactly
that argument is laughable.
Yeah, and then also you have to ignore this. Like, she presented.
Note for our listeners: Ross is not actually a murderous psychopath.
Not that.
Nor would I lend him a gun knowing that he was going to kill people with it.
Yes, not that we know of.
Are you kidding me? Ross is so lawful good.
I don't know. It's always the good ones.
Ross, come on. No, it's the worst poker face ever.
Maybe I just go and slaughter evil people.
I don't think a judge is going to stand up for that.
Well, that's why he doesn't get caught. Yeah. No. And even you also have to ignore, like, she's being like, oh yeah, her low point of stabbing Kylo Ren, but then she lifts herself back up, and it's like, well, in order for that to hold up, you have to ignore the fact that, as far as story structure goes, that's not her lifting her up from her low point. Her low point is when she banishes herself to Octo right after that. This isn't her low point and then redemption. This is her breaking point. Like, you have to ignore the story structure going on here. Like, she didn't hit her lowest point, pick herself back up, and then banish herself to Octo and need to be picked up by Luke. Because that's not how it works. It can't be both her breaking point and her redemption point. It's not. That doesn't work, so you're ignoring a lot there. And you're also adding some stuff in there. You're framing this as something that framing it that way is understandable. That is one of my complaints of that scene, that it's like, oh no, she did something horrible. And then she fixes it and has a quiet moment with him. Oh, and then remember she's panicked and runs away. Like, that's bad writing. But also, you're adding things in here. Like, she's framing this end portion as like, oh yeah, Rey's being nonviolent. It's like, no, she didn't go there with this goal of being nonviolent. She went there with the plan of murdering Palpatine. Because dude needed to be murdered. Not that it's ever effective, apparently. But, yeah, she went there with the plan of violence. And only didn't choose violence because the bad guy was like, oh, that's what I want you to do. And even then she was like, oh shucks, I guess I have to. Like, that she still went along with the violent plan until it was just suddenly, like, fell into her lap. That it's like, oh, I guess I'm just gonna stand it. There's no choice there. There is no active decision of nonviolence, like the way that they presented it in this article. Yep. She's wholly making all of that up. And I don't blame her. It is a nicer story. I like it better. But it's not what the movie did.
Yeah. That actually would have made it far more interesting, I think. And even if we do say that that's what happened, like, it's just not done very well. Like, you compare that to something like Aang from Avatar: The Last Airbender, which frankly is kind of pulling that out of nowhere, where it's just like, oh, I don't want to be violent. It's like, okay, cool. And now I'm just going to be conveniently handed a method of neutralizing this problem with nonviolence by a random giant turtle lion. I was like, okay, that's kind of out of nowhere, but it's still better than the usual Disney approach of, hey, you know what? We don't want our heroes to be too violent, so the villain will just inexplicably take care of themselves. Yeah. It was like, no, it's not a message of nonviolence if Gaston's just like, oh, I'm going to stab him now, and whoops, I conveniently fell to my death instead. Like that, and that's all that happens with Palpatine here. It's a convenient hoist on his own petard Disney villain death. It's meaningless. It's just for the sake of like, oh, you know, we don't want her to just strike him down because that's kind of generally been a bad thing, and we've literally established in this scene that for some reason she can't because blah 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 randomness. So it's not really a good example of a nonviolent plot, and Star Wars has given us better plots of nonviolence before. I mean, like, would have been way better, say, if, you know, you had one of the main characters, a hero who is actively interested in not engaging the bad guy in violence because they actually really care about the bad guy, and so they don't want to hurt them, but the bad guy hates them, so they're just going to non-violently engage them, not even land a single blow in the lightsaber fight, so that the people they care about can escape without a single shot being fired at any of the bad guys. That would be a good example of a nonviolent engagement from a hero. And that's what we got in The Last Jedi, and it was much better than this is being portrayed as. Like, and that wasn't even an explicitly like, oh, this is about nonviolence. It was about Luke not wanting to engage his nephew, which is understandable, and so finding a way to win by doing that. And meaningfully giving him his life in the process, like straining himself to the point that it killed him, but he did it saving people without killing his nephew. Like, that is meaningful. This is less so. So, I want to go through Rey's arc and Kylo's arc here, and we'll touch on Luke and Leia as well, because this is the heart of the story. Rey and Kylo, this is the heart of the entire trilogy. This trilogy is about these two people, this dyad, and their relationship, so... And this movie basically forewent any attempts at giving anyone else an arc, and so we really need to focus on Rey, because this is where people usually point when I hear them saying, oh, but this is good, meaningful, here, Rey's story, Kylo's story, this is meaningful stuff. And I was just going to go through, like, okay, let's talk about each of these point by point, what people say about it, but I realized it would probably be more efficient to discuss the story itself and establish what these scenes are, because a lot of people have very different ideas about what some of these scenes were than I did. So, Rey's arc. Rey, from our very first shot of Rey, and this is actually we're going to give a little side point here, but this is just a point of how things say things whether you intend them to or not, and so you have to be careful with what you're putting into a movie. Our very first shot of Rey is her floating in the sky, floating 7-8 feet above the ground,
something like that,
rocks orbiting her and everything, and it's like, wow, we have never seen a Jedi do this before in the movies. So the vast majority of our audience has never seen this. The closest we've ever seen was Luke floating a few inches above his seat at the end of Last Jedi, stopping himself from falling in the middle of Last Jedi. We've never seen a person float themselves in the movies. We've seen them jump.
Well, we do have Luke doing a handstand while floating rocks
Sure.
and still balancing Yoda.
Sure, but we've
It's-
never seen anyone float of their own accord
Yeah.
in the movies.
Yeah.
And it is a small thing. I'm not saying it's a huge distinction. That's actually why I liked it in Last Jedi, because I was like, whoa, Luke, I've never seen a Jedi do this. It's it's subtle, it's not big and flashy, which is why I liked it, but it is showing this, like, Luke is powerful. Dude's been cut off from the Force for years, and he's still just right in that first moment when Rey attacks him, he can stop himself from even hitting the ground with the Force. Like, this guy is on the ball. He's powerful. And now we've got Luke floating a solid 7 or 8 feet above the ground, stuff orbiting her and stuff. Like, the obvious implication here is that she has reached a level of power or finesse in the Force like we've never seen before. But that's not the case. It's just there to look cool without any thought of how it fits in the world, like what it's saying, which kind of sums up this movie in a nutshell. And for, you know, I'm sure there are some people listening to that going, oh, come on, you're going to be that picky. It's like, yes, I am an editor. It is literally my job to be this picky. And that is the level of attention to detail that I expect from any writer, because that's what the process is.
Well, and what's sad, too, is this movie has, I'm assuming, more than one editor whose job it is to just briefly scan and say, hey, does this check out? Like, do these pieces kind of fit together? And my problem with episode 9 is, you know, I'm no editor. Like, I'm an academic. I've written a fair amount of papers. I'm pretty good at it. And Chris still does a good job when I would give him papers and stuff, and he would find stuff that I'm like, oh yeah, how did I miss that? But like, what I'm saying is, like, I kind of know what I'm talking about too a little bit with that, like, basic level of competence.
You do.
And even I'm looking at this movie going, ooh, you know, oh, that doesn't fit. Wait, but didn't you just say this? Well, what about that? Like, there's a whole bunch of stuff that just does not add up here.
And to be fair, production was rather rushed by many accounts. JJ got brought back onto the project fairly late. Like, I get that. That's not really an excuse, though. The end product has to stand on its own one way or the other. In the end, if the product isn't good, saying, oh, well, they didn't have time, doesn't justify it. They should have made time. The studio should have given them more time. Okay, so but that's kind of a side thing, but it is an example of, like, yes, it is not unreasonable to be that picky about level of attention to detail. That is what good writers do, period. And that's that. Okay, so she's floating, and she is whispering, be with me. Because apparently she's trying to connect with the Jedi of the past, and this is fairly important to her arc here. It's setting up a final moment. We're basically never going to mention it again between this moment and that moment. But, you know, okay, you can do that sometimes. But the more important question, like, everything in this just kind of falls apart with the application of one or two words, and it's usually starting with why. The question of why just tears apart most good things people say about this movie. So she's trying to connect with the Jedi of the past. What does that even mean? Like, so she's just trying to get them to talk to her? What? Like, this movie never really makes it clear to us what her goal is in regards with them being with her. What that means. Why is it even important to her? Why is this her goal? It's kind of an odd goal because this has never been a goal of any Jedi, or even something that was implied to be needed. I mean, Luke had Obi-Wan and Yoda just show up when they felt like it, but it wasn't anything he put any effort into. Why is this a goal of Rey's at this point?
I would say this is one where I'll push back a little bit.
Great, please do.
I mean, you mentioned that Luke has Yoda and Ben showing up to him to be like, hey, dude, you know, here's some guidance or whatever. Rey may have heard stories or been taught this by Luke that, hey, you know, Jedi are connected. We're all, you know, there is the idea that she knows that the Force connects all things, and, you know, so I think it's possible that
I don't
she
think
could
it's a bad
be,
idea for her to want some sort of connection or help.
Yeah.
But it does raise the question of, if, like, Obi-Wan and Yoda showed up without any apparent effort on Luke's part, why isn't Luke just showing up to talk to her?
And that is fair. Yeah. That's fair. But I could see Rey going, okay, be with me, where she's just feeling, okay, I'm in over my head.
Sure.
This is a bit of a challenge here, you know. It would be real great if you other dead Jedi that are apparently hanging around could lend some help or some insight here. Okay. So I can give that.
Sure. She's got Leia here.
Yeah.
She's already met Luke, and he shows that he can show up. So why hasn't he? And even for these other Jedi, why don't they show up sooner? What changes between the end when they do show up and now that causes them to show up? nothing is the answer. Like, nothing does. It's basically, well, I mean, it's the end of the movie, so now it's time for us to show up.
Yeah.
But when you step back and look at this from a perspective of something that's not an artifice, like, oh, it's the end of the story. Like, if they don't have any meta knowledge, it just seems like the Jedi are kind of being dicks. It's like, oh, she's feeling a need for support, whatever. Yeah, maybe we'll show up later.
It's not a story the Jedi would tell you.
In the words of one of my favorite YouTube series, How to Dad, the Kiwi guy, he did a whole video on how New Zealand people parent their children. Apparently, the major phrase is "she'll be right."
She'll be right. Yeah. Well, and that's the thing is it's really the reason this is here. I would say is because they wanted to do a big I Am Iron Man moment at the end.
Oh, yeah.
And have the Jedi show up, and so they're just like, oh, we got to set that up in advance. Chekhov's gun and everything. It's like, we got to have it earlier if we're going to use it. Yes, I know that's not the actual Chekhov's gun. It's a corollary. Anyway.
Like you did a whole panel on that.
Yeah, it is.
Did we do it as an episode, too?
We didn't do Chekhov's guns in this episode, no, but I did discuss it on the Facebook group.
Maybe that's what
but it's like
an episode
it's because they want to do it later,
yeah.
but again, why? Like it feels to me like, well, and there is one very clear and consistent message that this movie gives. It's not any of the ones that people usually point out of like, oh, it's about finding a place, or it's about you can be whoever you want. You don't have to be what your blood says, and blah, 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 blah. The clear and consistent message that this movie gives is that the original cast and movies have a bigger dick than the new ones. And that is it. Straight up. They are more important, more valuable, more meaningful.
It's hilarious that you mentioned that, like, oh, yeah, this message, you don't have to be what your blood is. They could have actually just left Episode 8 alone and had the same message.
Exactly.
Because Rey's blood, as we left in Episode 8, is the blood of a nobody. You're Rey nobody from nowhere, and you can be a somebody. Not just a somebody, but a pretty important somebody. You're the head of the new Jedi Order. That's a pretty big change. Congratulations. No, let's ruin it with a terrible Palpatine sexed or cloned or somebody.
And that's the thing is, so when it comes to Rey and actually Kylo, and every other new character in this movie, all the characters of the new trilogy, this movie is about subordinating them and making them inferior to the originals. It's about them knowing their place. And it's not a great look. And you might think that, oh, you're reading all of that into one Be With Me. It's like, oh, no. Just hold on here. There's plenty of it. Okay, we get the pointless training scene. Yes, she pins BB-8 beneath the tree. It really doesn't matter. Rey wants to prove herself worthy of Luke's lightsaber. No. I'm going to prove myself worthy. This is where we really get into the subordinating her to what came before. She's inferior to what came before. We need to stress that because there's been a lot of people online really upset that she's showing up Luke or something when that's really never been the point. Like, Luke was the central fixture of Episode 8. It ended on this point of Luke is the hero who is inspiring everyone. If anything, it was undoing JJ's decision to be like, oh yeah, nobody really knows who Luke is anymore. He just kind of vanished and is just now a myth that nobody cares about. And Rian Johnson was going, no, Luke is an inspiring hero who inspires the entire galaxy, and we're going to do that. And then this movie came in and was like, nah, just kidding. No, that really didn't have any effect on the galaxy whatsoever. So, Rey wants to prove herself worthy of Luke's lightsaber. That's kind of odd, given, if, like, say, the lightsaber itself called to Rey in Episode 7, like, it literally chose her. Rey is one of the few people alive with the experience and perspective to understand Luke as the flawed but amazing person he was, not some exaggerated legend that she has to live up to. She knows how much harm trying to live up to his own legends and its expectations did to him. So to have her entire attitude of him suddenly be one of reverence is a bit odd, to say the least. Except that that's what this movie is about, is like, whoa, no, that didn't happen. He's not flawed. He's perfect. How dare you suggest that Saint Skywalker might ever have a bad thought?
I was about to say it's almost like they're trying to say that, Episode 8 didn't matter, and then I was like, oh wait, no.
That was
the whole point, is that Episode 8 didn't happen. Here it is. We're just going to go straight from Episode 7 to Episode 9.
Yep. Well, and we, as Star Wars fans, and probably most of our listeners, know that one of the steps to becoming a Jedi is building your own lightsaber.
Yeah.
And it was at one time, canon, I don't know if it still is, but it was at one time canon that the lightsabers of deceased Jedi were kept for Padawans to use until they could build their own.
I don't know if that's current
I haven't been able to find anything that it is, but I know that it was at one point. And so having
the
Rey,
idea that that part of being a Jedi, like you, when you are done being a Padawan, basically you're because like you have the Jedi trials to become a Jedi Master or a Jedi Knight or whatever. Like one of the final things you do as a Padawan is build your own lightsaber, and with that lightsaber, you then have your trials to become a Jedi Knight. So
generally speaking, the goal of a Padawan learner is to build their own lightsaber, not to prove themselves worthy of someone else's. This is completely backwards.
That proving yourself worthy of somebody else's lightsaber almost seems like a Sith doctrine, where it's kind of like, well, I'm even better than, Darth Plagueis, so I'm gonna take his lightsaber, and I'm gonna, that trying to live up to or outshine someone else, that seems to me very like Sith, not Jedi at all.
See, and Rey did care about this lightsaber in both episode 7 and 8. Like, it was a big deal. She retrieved the pieces and had them at the end of 8. It's not like she didn't care about this, but proving herself worthy of something that's already chosen her, proving herself worthy of someone that she knows on a more human level than necessarily that level of reverence, and in the complete reverse of how Jedi training usually works, is really weird if our goal isn't just making her subordinate to Luke. And especially because this scene will be undone in a few minutes. Leia's like, yeah, keep the lightsaber. And she's like, no, I can't do that. And then in a couple minutes when they leave, Leia's like, I'll take the lightsaber with you. And she's like, okay. Also, why would she not feel worthy already? Girl has done some great crap. Mm-hmm. Like, this scene depends on the audience being in a state where they're just fine with the idea that, oh, well, of course Rey's unworthy. Of course she's inferior. Yeah, we all know that. It's not a great look, folks. Finn, Poe, and Chewie come back, and here we get the scene that undercuts any point the film might have been trying to make about Rey pinning BB-8, about her, like, losing her anger, that, being angry, losing her temper there, about that being a bad thing. It's like, well, Poe then shows up with the Millennium Falcon literally on fire. And it's almost, I can't tell if it was meant to be a joke or not, because this movie has trouble with that. But it's like, Finn's like freaking out because BB-8's damaged, and none of us could see it. Like, there's no notable damage, and it almost feels like it's supposed to be a like humorous thing, like, oh, disproportionate reactions are funny, like, yeah, he set the entire Millennium Falcon on fire, but he's upset about the scratch on his droid, that's funny. But it's like, it really, here's how mirroring is bad if you're not doing it right. They have each damaged something belonging, like the Millennium Falcon doesn't belong to her, but she cares about it. They have each damaged something, they are each upset about it, and she is clearly way more justified than he is, to the point that it seems like it might be a joke, but it explicitly undercuts any point it might have been trying to make about her having done something bad here with BB-8. Like, you can't do that if you're juxtaposing those two, which they did. None of that really matters. So the next major point, Rey thinks she exploded Chewbacca. Setting aside how rushed it is, the whole undoing it right away thing, and the whole in a few scenes I'll be able to sense Chewie's presence, well, he's in orbit, but I can't right now thing, she has very little reaction to the fact that she let herself get angry, lost control, accidentally channeled her anger into force-freaking lightning, and it killed her friend. Like, yes, it didn't actually happen, but she thought it did. This is a big deal, and we basically get one quick scene of her being distraught over it with Finn. No one else is that distraught over it. And then in the next scene, she's hitting the streets, no big deal, gotta do what you gotta do. The emotions vanish the second they're not being showcased.
Yeah, and as far as the only pushback I can offer on this is like, okay, I can understand Finn and Poe being able to brush it aside, to be like, hey, it's like Finn and Poe, they've been around war and death their whole lives. So it's like, okay, so it sucks that you lost a friend. You gotta
Finn's
move
first
on.
time going into war was literally at the beginning of Force Awakens. So and he did not have a good reaction to that.
Okay, that's fair. So but Poe, it's
I
like,
can understand.
I can understand that, but even so, it's not. I think your point still stands, but I'm trying to give as much.
I think more they were maybe going for is maybe she was numb, but even that, it doesn't.
Yeah, it doesn't come across as numb. It comes across as indifferent.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I don't even think it comes across as indifferent. I think it comes across as forgotten. The writers have forgotten that scene came just before this one. Whatever, we're not filming these in order. Who cares?
Yeah.
Like and I'm sure some people are sitting there like, well, how are they supposed to, like, she's got to move on and do things. Like, how is she supposed to showcase those? Well, we'll get into it later because she does it later. And so we know that these writers can do this and that these actors can do this. They just didn't here. And that's kind of a big deal. And again, on the emotions disappearing, because of technobabble nonsense, 3PO has to have his memory wiped. It's basically death. I actually like it as a means of, like, here is a serious consequence if they had left it without killing a character. I thought it was a good choice. But, I mean, you'd think, from a writing perspective, it's basically impossible for someone not to bring up how difficult it is to lose 3PO when they just barely lost Chewie, right? Now, no one mentions it. Connections never made. There's no emotion here beyond just nostalgia baiting. So, Star Destroyers show up. Rey feels the presence of Chewbacca because convenience. She is so relieved, right? Like, they race up to save him. We get a hugely emotional moment when she busts him out of his cell and gets to hug him, and he's alive. Oh, wait, no, she's not even there. She sent Finn and Poe after Chewie while she went off to get a dagger, which, as far as they know, no longer is of any use to them. Like, she had a feeling about it or something, but this having a feeling about this dagger was more important than, oh my gosh, I didn't murder my friend.
Yeah.
Was the memory thing complete by the time they left? It was, right?
Yes.
Yeah, because
Yep, they already had the
3PO,
information.
Yeah. 3PO
Well,
goes
Chris,
up
if
with
I
it.
thought I'd accidentally killed you, but there was a cool dagger around, I also might.
Well, I understand that, but we're not as close as Rey and Chewie. I mean, if it was a really cool dagger, okay. If it was the dagger of time, yeah.
That's true.
Sure.
But what if it's the Sith Thing Finder dagger?
Yeah,
Oh,
no.
okay.
See, and that's the thing, is basically the plot beat is more important than the character,
Yeah.
and the story suffers because of it. So, big moment. Rey telefights Kylo, he figures out where she is, comes to fight her, and then he drops the bombshell on her. Rey's parents loved her and died to keep her safe. Holy crap. This is huge for her. One of, if not the central characteristics of her character, the thing that drove/hindered her through the first two movies, including Episode 7, J.J. Abrams is the one who wrote this initially, is that she wants to believe her parents loved her and would have come back for her. Something hindered them. She wants a place. She wants a family. That was her whole thing in Episode 7. And then she realized that she had the Force, and like so many orphans before her, she began to fantasize about how awesome her parents might be. Because, I mean, if she has the Force, so could they. Maybe they were important. Maybe knowing who they are will help her find a place in all this. Know what her assigned role is. And then Kylo hit her with the worst possible truth for her. The antithesis to her entire character. Her parents didn't love her. They were nobodies who sold her for drinking money. That is the worst possible thing she could have heard, which is literally why Rian Johnson chose it. He has said so in interviews.
Yeah.
Just like it was the worst possible thing for Luke to learn that his hated enemy was actually his father and his masters had lied to him this whole time. Completely threw everything into disarray for him. It was the worst possible thing he could have heard. And now, and that's what Rey got hit with in Episode 8. Everything. Your central character is founded on nothing. You've been lying to yourself. All your desires and dreams are hopeless, childish nonsense. And after years of clinging to that hope, she was forced to set it aside. But she had a surrogate family, friends that she had met. The movie ends with her surrounded by them in a better place because she realizes when she lifts those rocks and has a moment, and it's admittedly one of the sloppier done moments of this movie is her realizing this. It's not as clear-cut as I would have liked it to be, but she realizes that she can find a place in it, that she still has people who care about her. She has a place. And now, after a year of just living with that, all of a sudden, it wasn't true. Her parents loved her after all. They sacrificed themselves and sold her to protect her. Yeah. They didn't come back because they couldn't, just like she always hoped. They would have been there if they could. Every orphan's naive, ridiculous daydream, in her case, was true. This reveal explicitly undoes everything about the one from The Last Jedi. Don't ever let anyone try and tell you that, oh yeah, we had that reveal and then we had this one. They work perfectly fine in order. It's not a big deal. It's just more of the same. It's like, no.
And it's so poorly written to say that her parents actually did love her and they were kind of loving, but then to leave her on Jakku with Unkar Plutt, it still stands what we said when we first started this podcast, that regardless of who Rey's parents are, they're terrible people.
Yep.
Because again, I understand that the Emperor's a threat, and if he's coming after your kid, you got to do something about it. I fully get that. But when your options are like, Dear Leia, leader of the resistance and the underground,
Yep.
and a genuinely good person, would you please look after my extremely force-sensitive daughter who the Emperor's trying to kill? Or option B, leave her with, at the very least, an emotionally abusive blobfish in the middle of a desert with no resources.
The movie clarifies they did in fact sell her. Like their money changed hands here.
Yeah.
Like what? That makes no sense.
Well, like the sale is bad enough, but like selling her to Leia would have still been a better,
or just leaving it
like
go to one of the old women scrubbing stuff for Unkar Plutt and just be like, hey, can you take care of my child?
Yeah.
She's in the exact same situation, but you haven't sold her off to a slaver as property.
Right, and instead
she's
it's
still
like
going to end up there,
him,
but it's still less bad.
It's so dumb. It makes no sense.
This
at
should
all.
be the biggest thing ever for her. Like, this is literally all her dreams just come true, finding this out. But the writers don't actually care about her as a character. They just care about hack imitation of the originals. Oh, and also her grandpa was a bad guy or something. Like, right, yeah, that's totally a big deal. She learned that. I can't imagine any universe where that would be more significant to her than learning about her parents. Kylo tells her she's destined to fall to the dark side because of this. It's in her blood or something. Medievalans. Oh, but wait, he literally just barely told her about her parents rebelled against Palps and died to keep her safe. So they weren't destined for evil, but she is? And I'm sure some people are like, oh, but he couldn't use the Force. It's different. He didn't have the pull to the dark side.
That has been a thing.
Yep. Even if that's so, Luke Skywalker, anyone? This guy that she supposedly reveres, that she's trying to prove herself worthy of, like the deific Jedi that everyone admires. She knows his story backwards and forwards. Oh, but he did have trouble with the dark side. Okay, Leia Organa, Rey's master with whom she's trained for the last year, who, as far as any of us know, never had even the slightest trouble with the dark side ever.
Yeah.
And both of whom were the children of Darth Vader. Like, or, hell, let's keep going. Han was raised as a criminal on the streets, but moved on from that. They literally just barely learned basically the same thing about Poe. And arguably her best friend in the world, at least until this movie came along and demonstrated that she really does not give a single F about him, was a brainwashed from birth child soldier for the baddies until he decided to walk away from that because he was just better than it, again, until this movie came along. Literally everything in her life is screaming at her that this should not be a concern. And that's one of the problems with just doing the same thing over again, is that we're at a point in the Star Wars universe where the characters should be aware enough of how this goes to realize, oh hey, we've learned this lesson already. Like, this should not be a concern for her. And even if we ignore all of that, it's still, it's overdone cliche and childish. Like, when Luke found out Vader was his dad, we didn't pick up Episode 8 with him being like, well, I'm doomed to be evil then. Because Luke was raised by two good people and knew he was a good person, and he wouldn't suddenly think he was doomed just because his father, that had no part in influencing his growth, turned out to be a bad guy. I mean, think about it. If you suddenly found out that your family heritage was a lie, and that you were actually the grandchild of Hitler, would you suddenly go, oh crap, I'm doomed to murder Jewish people? Like,
by the bushel.
Yeah, I mean, like, no, that's not a problem because he has had no effect on your life whatsoever. You already know that you are good people because you have been proving that your entire lives, just like she has.
Yeah.
Now, with a character like Prince Zuko, that concern makes sense. He was raised by a horrible father with a horrible sister in a culture that taught some horrible things. Like,
well, and this goes to the philosophical argument of nature versus nurture. You know, it's a little bit of both, but for me, it's definitely the nurture that influences people.
Sure.
That's clear to see.
Even if you're concerned about that, Rey exists in a setting where she is inundated with examples that nature does not overrule nurture.
Right, exactly.
Or even that nature does not overrule just inherent decency in the case with Finn. Like, Finn's a brainwashed child soldier who just up and left it because he couldn't do that.
Yeah.
There was no nurture. There's nothing about that.
Yeah, and Finn is such a great example of that because his nurture is, like, in the extreme.
Yes.
To produce him in a certain way. You know, a bad way. And he is still able to go, maybe not for me.
Yeah. This is really just the writers going, well, we did it before, so it's fine if we do it again, they're just shoving a plot in here without actually considering how well it fits. So, they head to Endor, blah, blah, blah. Oh, and here, if you thought I was being picky before, asking too much about Rey showing emotion over Chewie's supposed death, like that was some sort of big, difficult, or intrusive thing, here's how it's done. Like, the reveal of her true grandparentage, just stop and think about how dumb that is, really. It has shaken Rey. Like, she is shook. She is impatient and irritable. She needs answers now. She refuses to wait for a safer time to go out to the Death Star wreckage because this is bothering her and will continue to do so. She is short with her friends. She freaking force pushes Finn away when he interrupts her fight. She has stupid force visions about this scary fear of hers. So apparently she is more upset over who her grandpa was than she was when she freaking thought she'd murdered her friend. Like, I mean, regular listeners know that I hate what the Harry Potter movies did to Ron Weasley, but I will still quote him on this. She needs to get her priorities straight. There's like, if you're going to do a storyline of someone being concerned that they're doomed to be evil or something, you need to have that successively building up to a point, not have her indisputably worst action right at the beginning where it's like, oh my gosh, I murdered my friend, this should be shaking me up more than anything, and then going on to, oh no, it turns out my grandpa was bad. Like, no, that's ridiculous. Those don't sequence right. She should not be more upset about this than she was about Chewie. There's no consideration of Rose's emotions and thoughts as a continuous thread over time. Just moments completely disconnected from any others, which is, if Film Crit Hulk did a great essay on J.J. Abrams' writing of movies after Rise of Skywalker came out, and how that's basically how he functions as a writer. Like, he doesn't seem to have any coherent through awareness of emotion over time. It's just moments that sort of work on their own, but if you pay any attention to the context of what's going on, they all fall apart because he only wants you to focus on the moment. And the only times he manages to get out of that tend to be when he's just following beat for beat a plot line like he did with Force Awakens. So let's discuss the stabbiness. 10 minutes after the initial reveal of her grandparentage, literally, Kylo shows up, they fight, he gets distracted, she stabs him, she's horrified, she heals him. Within Rey's arc, as I said before, this is supposed to be her big breaking point, but why is this her breaking point? Like, first of all, you again have the problem that she's apparently more upset over stabbing her enemy in a fair fight than she was over accidentally incinerating her friend. It's not great. I get that she's supposed to have feelings for Kylo and everything, but this movie has done nothing to set that up. Like, all of that is just coasting on what the last movie did. They do nothing to set up any sort of emotional connection between these people.
If it makes you feel any better, I wouldn't have any qualms about stabbing you in a fair fight.
I wouldn't expect you to. You know, if we are brandishing lightsabers at each other and actually fighting,
feel bad
that's a legit
if I accidentally
expectation.
incinerated Ross.
That's true. I would also feel bad if I accidentally incinerated almost anyone. I mean, if Stalin was still around and I incinerated him by accident,
Would it be by accident, though?
It might be. I mean, I don't know what accidents might happen.
Assuming it's an accident.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah. But this is also supposed to be some sort of nadir for her, like her most dark-sidey action of the movie, but it's really not. Like, I get that she's supposed to care about Kylo, but he's a repeatedly unrepentant mass murderer who, at the very least, facilitated genocide, who has repeatedly tried to murder her friends, even after they developed some sort of connection.
And who, as far as she knows, is trying to kill her currently.
And has been pursuing her with the stated intent of turning her to the dark side, possibly forcibly.
Yeah.
Turning her to the dark side, or if she won't, killing her.
Yeah. It's like, and is also the supreme leader of the Order of Space Nazis that is currently effing up the galaxy. Like,
yeah.
This isn't, like, to put it in D&D terms, she would not lose her paladin powers over killing him here.
That's true.
This is not an
She might
evil
actually
action.
gain a couple of paladin powers.
The fact that she's upset when she does it, that she's not thinking, sure, that's not great. But again, dude had it coming. No matter how much you're shipping them, I think that's a hard thing to deny. And I will say real quick, just that, like, yeah, I get that Daisy Ridley and Adam Driver are definitely just trying their hardest. They are acting their hearts out to try and convince us that these people care about each other and have some sort of emotional connection. And they don't do a bad job of it because they're amazing actors.
Yeah.
But you can't push a narrative on acting alone. The script has to support it.
And that's true.
Just ask Oscar Isaacs.
True. And I will say this for the Reylos, right? I'm thinking of your sister and Kelsey, who we had on a little while ago. Their chemistry when they are supposed to be connecting with each other and stuff, like Adam Driver and Daisy Ridley do a good job.
Yeah.
But the framework of the story that they're trying to sell you on, like the individual,
there is no actual romance or
the individual
development.
moments taken as individual moments.
If you just do a
really
screen
good.
cap of them looking at each other, it's really convincing.
It is really convincing, and they do a good job. But overall, when you're looking at it in the context of the whole story, you're just going, but really though,
we haven't been given a romance here.
Yeah.
We've been given like some, not even half-assed, like 16th-assed gestures toward that. And even if we were to accept that this is a dark side moment, this is difficult, she immediately fixes it, and it's just done. And yet somehow it's still her lowest moment. Like that, no, it doesn't work. So she flees to Octo for 2 whole minutes. Luke appears, talks her out of it, sends her back into the fight. We've seen scenes like this in a million different movies. It's the end of the second act. Heroes at their lowest point finally learns the lesson they need to learn and rises up stronger than before because of it. It's Alfred reminding Bruce, "Why do we fall, Master Bruce? So we can learn to pick ourselves back up." It's the Incredibles getting captured and Mr. Incredible realizing he's been self-centered in vain and needs to make it up to his family. It's Simba, you have forgotten me. It's some people are worth melting for. It's everywhere, and that's not even a complaint. Like, that's just the structure of this particular story of formula. That's fine in and of itself. The idea of having a scene like this isn't a problem. But what is Rey's lesson here, exactly? What picks her back up? There's 2 primary points to Luke's pick-me-up speech. First, he tells her the blindingly obvious, that she needs to face her fears, that she can choose to be whoever she wants, regardless of her family, i.e. Sheev, since we're ignoring her parents ever existed. Yada yada yada. It's a little trite, but it's a nice soundbite. Confronting fear is the destiny of a Jedi. It's a solid line. I don't have any complaints with the line itself. Thematic and on point as far as the Star Wars franchise as a whole. But how does it even get applied? Like, if the destiny of the Jedi is confronting fear, then presumably Rey faces her fear next, but she doesn't. Like, sure, she goes to confront Palpatine, but Palps isn't actually her fear here. The dark side is, in that she's destined to fall to the dark side. Like, Rey's primary fear is what she might become, not who her grandparent was. Confronting Palpatine is not the same thing as confronting her fears. And after that point, she's never actually tempted by the dark side at any point again. She just shows up, goes, shucks, I guess I have to kill him and let him inhabit my body or whatever, arbitrarily changes her mind, and then stands there with a pair of lightsabers until the problem resolves itself. Like, she never actually faces fear. Compare this to Luke's problems with the dark side, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Luke confronts the dark side several times. Rey just goes to face the bad guy and never has any trouble. Like, there's no actual difficulty, no facing the fear. It's like the writers were muddling through a familiar plot, made it 2/3 of the way through, and then just forgot to do the rest.
And also, I don't know if this is the point you're going to move on to.
I hope it is.
Well, I just realized
or I hope it's
that,
even more, actually. That would be awesome.
We've already established that the first thing that we've seen Rey do in the movie is to try and connect to the spirits of the Force, and that the big resolution at the end of the movie is that she connects to the spirits of the Force. But here's Luke. She's now done the connection, which is supposed to be
and it's not the one I was going to make.
It's supposed to be the climax of the movie where she connects to her predecessor Jedi, but here she does it here on Octo just fine.
Well, it's because she didn't connect to them, not that she does later. I mean, it's just arbitrary. No, that's not the point I was going to make. Here's part 2. I like that one, though. So yeah, after that, so Luke told her to face her fears, but she was still uncertain. She's still kind of like, I don't know. And what finally convinced her in that conversation? Do you remember? Luke told her that he and Leia always knew who Rey was, and they wouldn't have trained her if she couldn't turn out good. Okay, so first of all, this is yet another instance of the movie subordinating Rey to the original cast. Does she realize her own inherent value here? Does she recognize that she's already repeatedly made the choice to be good 6 times over the last 2.5 films, and that she can continue to do so? Does she realize that she already has a surrogate family that will support her and help her through difficult times and choices if she would just stop literally pushing them away? No. She realizes she's okay because the important people said so it must be true. You know how most movies about characters that crave external validation end with the characters realizing they don't need others' approvals after all? Well, this is a movie where the character craves external validation and then just gets it. And that's how she knows she's good. And if you don't realize why that's a problem, go talk to a therapist for a bit, because it's pretty bad. There's a reason movies don't take this approach to this particular plot. But we all just, well, not we all, obviously, but a lot of people just accept it because, well, of course she needs the approval of the Jedi. Of course they're all better than her and need to approve her. Like, no. Second of all, does she have Luke and Leia's validation here? Let's take a quick jump back in the story to the one that this is aping. Why did Obi-Wan and Yoda withhold from Luke the truth of his heritage?
They were afraid that he would turn out evil like Vader.
Yeah. I would say the most generous interpretation here is that they are concerned that he's young and good and naive, and if he finds this out, he's not going to have the strength to do what needs to be done.
Yeah.
And they're actually completely right about that. Like, that's exactly what he does once he finds out the truth. And maybe also they're concerned that if he has all of these conflicting feelings about family and this, that, and the other, the Emperor and Vader might try and use those against him to manipulate him to the dark side. Which is, again, exactly what they do. Obi-Wan and Yoda were only wrong about the necessity of killing Vader. That's all. Mm-hmm. But they were correct. They were absolutely correct about what Luke finding out his parentage would do to Luke and how it would be used against him. And I mean, if you want to take it nastier, it's like, oh yeah, they were two old guys trying to radicalize someone into their terrorist organization. It's like it can get pretty bad if you look at it that way. But I'm willing to let's look on this in the most positive light. They were worried about how Luke might handle it because he's fighting against his father, and that could be used against him. Arguably well meant, a little callous in the long run, but well intentioned. Back to Rise of Skywalker. If Luke and Leia knew all along, why didn't they tell Rey the truth about her heritage? It can't be the same reasons as Obi-Wan and Yoda. No one knew that Palpatine was still alive. So how could her emotions over family get in the way of anything?
Yeah.
There was no reason to be concerned that Rey knowing the truth would limit her ability to deal with the First Order, Snoke and Kylo. And of all of the people in the galaxy, Luke, my dad cut off my hand Skywalker, is the number one person who should know that Rey would have been better off dealing with this knowledge in a safe space supported by supportive and caring people, rather than finding out from her enemy in a dangerous situation like he did. Yet he and Leia chose to withhold the truth. Over time, some people might be like, oh, well, maybe they did know that Snoke was Palpatine all along, and that's why they're concerned. It's like, then why didn't they tell the rest of the effing galaxy? Like, why is this only coming up now? We all know why it's only coming up now. It's because it was added at the last minute as a ridiculous thing. But within the context of the story, that isn't a justifiable reason, so what reasons could exist? And the only one I can think of is that they were worried that if Rey knew the truth, she would just turn to the dark side over it. In other words, they didn't tell her because they weren't confident in her. But now them not telling her is them already knowing this is why they are confident in her, and she should get up and get going again. Like, it implies that Luke straight up lied to Rey here. Just said whatever he thought would get her back in the fight. Which isn't great.
Yeah, that's what you want in a mentor.
Yeah. Oh, and in case you've really been fighting against the idea that this movie sacrifices Rey's story for the sake of Luke and Leia, Leia left her lightsaber to be picked up by someone who would finish her journey. Leia's journey. Not Rey's. This isn't Rey's. Like, Luke literally says, oh yeah, you're gonna pick this up and finish Leia's journey, but this is your fight. Like, no, that's not how it works. But whatever, right? Who cares? She's back in the fight, off to ExxonMobil. She lands, walks right in, and turns out Palpatine totally wants her to kill him after all, because mumbo jumbo bullcrap, blah, 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 blah. More specifically, he wants her to strike him down in anger, but since he told her that she now doesn't want to do that, but oh no, your friends are in danger, so you have to. She immediately folds. Oh shucks, darn, guess I'll just do what the baddie wants. No struggle, no denial, no anything. It's like Rey's suddenly been possessed by the spirit of Jyn or so. He wants her
you
to...
had fun writing this, didn't you?
Oh, yeah. No. It just rolls out actually pretty easily. But he wants her to strike him down in anger. She's pretty obviously not angry. I mean, if only we could find a scene of her stabbing someone in anger to compare with this one. Oh, wait, yeah, we literally
earlier
have
in the
one.
movie.
Yes. Seriously, the galaxy and her friends are in particular in danger. She has every reason to strike him down, including the moral high ground and no hint of anger. This shouldn't be a concern. For whatever reason, she folds immediately and then changes her mind because Kylo shut up. So what? Like, how does that change things? What does him being here do about the situation? My thought at the time was she's like, oh good, he'll kill him and get possessed and I don't have to worry about it. Yeah. Like, she passes him the lightsaber, he runs in, they face palps together with swords raised, and why? Like, what are they going to do here? They're just going to strike him down? Is she any less angry than she was before? No? Nothing's changed in any meaningful way, but this movie seems to think that something has. And then immediately undoes it. Like, Palps just tosses them aside. Like, he literally just grabs them, pulls them in without any effort whatsoever, and then sucks up all their energy. But so apparently he was already powerful enough to just toss 2 Skywalker-level powerful Jedi around like they're ragdolls, as he was when he was controlling and/or was Snoke, or who knows how that worked. Ben's dropped in a hole. Rey falls down. Oh no, she's fallen on the ground. Truly, this is the worst situation that any protagonist has ever been in. But it's okay, because the Jedi are here now or something. Why? Like, again, I've already said, nothing's changed. Like, it's not like she isn't actually facing her fears. She's not doing anything more. And even if she was, that just kind of seems like some arbitrary gate-creeping bullcrap. Like, oh no, sorry, we're not going to show up until you've put in the hours. It's like, oh god, that's ridiculous. She hasn't learned, she hasn't improved. It's just that people are programmed to understand that, oh yeah, things change at the end of the movie, and so they start to miss that there wasn't actually a reason for it. It's not a meaningful payoff. There's no in-world reason for it. So it does kind of make the Jedi look like dicks. There's a new Jedi. Whoa, now, who the heck does she think she is? Let's ignore her until she's demonstrated a sufficient amount of reverence for our superiority. Then we'll show up, do absolutely nothing, and take all the credit. Because, yeah, by the way, not only is there no reason for them to be here now, they don't actually do anything. All they do is whisper to her. It's like, oh yay, positive affirmation. I'm sure Rey couldn't have done this without the positive affirmation that they give her. Like, she needed a dozen Jedi to tell her that she could stand up and hold up a couple of lightsabers? Bull. That's ridiculous. It doesn't even pull off any meaningful thing. They're not doing anything for her. They try and paint this to some sort of resolution to Rey's needs, like, oh, she's been alone all this time, searching for a family, but now she's not alone. I've heard a lot of people say that. So, droid, please. At the end of 8, she was surrounded by friends, but then this movie decided that for some reason none of them, including her master Leia apparently, were good enough to make her not lonely. But here, in her not even close to darkest hour, Kylo showed up to help. Wait, no, never mind, he's gone. Now it's even darker. And then the disembodied voices of a dozen strangers show up. Strangers who have been ignoring her for no reason for a year. This isn't her family. She has no actual emotional connection to any of these people. And I know when someone's sitting there stubbornly shaking their head going, she wanted to be a Jedi and now the Jedi are here. That's meaning. Not when there was never any reason for them not to be here. They're just a-holes who have left her feeling unworthy for a year for no reason.
I was literally about to say because, I mean, there is something to be said. Like, you know, if you're really physically exerted, you know, to have someone there who's like, hey, come on, get up. You can do this. You can do one more push-up kind of thing. Like, there is something there for that. So, okay.
But sure.
But you're 100% right that, okay, well, now I'm hearing voices of a bunch of people I don't know telling me you can do this, right? I'll even give her that she can assume...
Not all of them are even saying that. Some of them are just like, you were never a clone, Rey.
Yeah.
Because we can't even stop dropping pointless exposition here.
Yeah. You know, so all of that stuff, okay, you know, but it makes no sense. And you can assume that... You can assume that Rey can assume that maybe these are the Jedi she's been looking to make a connection with. But... it's that mental reinforcement that you get from somebody saying, like, okay, you can do this, you know, one more push-up, keep going, whatever. It's always more useful when it's someone you know and trust and care for and all those good things. So, Luke is one of the voices, isn't
Luke
it?
is the only one she has any reason to recognize.
Right.
Leia is not there because her body hasn't disappeared yet because Rey hasn't completed her Jedi journey for her or some crap.
But I was just thinking to myself, you know, it would have been more impactful and probably helpful to Rey to have Kylo Ren say, hey, like, keep going, Rey, you can do this, you got this, I believe in you. Like, he's somebody that, whether she likes it or not, actually she does have kind of a connection to him, you know?
Sure.
So, but of course they blow the opportunity.
I'm like, compare this to the end of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Like, Milo's arc is actually very similar. Miles, not Milo.
Miles, yeah.
Miles is concerned that he's not good enough. He is overburdened by other people's expectations. He doesn't feel like he can live up to them. And then, you know, he gets a nice speech from his dad where he realizes that he will be loved no matter what, even if he fails or doesn't live up to, like, the expectations aren't what's important. He is, and he's been kind of snubbed by the people who thought he couldn't do it, and now one of them is going to have to sacrifice themselves because he wasn't doing it, and he goes, no, I'm going to do this. He goes and sends them all home, and then the ending is him standing up and dealing... Like, there's a reason the movie doesn't end with the other Spider-Men going home. They go home, he faces off with Kingpin on his own because the whole point of his story is that he is capable of doing this. And so he does it on his own. He gets knocked down, and yeah, it's really awkward that Kingpin just stands there and watches him get back up for like 5 minutes. But he gets up on his own. In fact, almost every hero in the history of this get back, like the get back up moment is a staple of superhero movies and action movies in general. And almost no one needs a dozen voices talking to them to get them to do it because it's a thing that heroes do. Heroes get back up. We know this. This is not here because Rey needs it. This is actually the definition of pandering to the audience. If you've ever wondered what I meant by that, this is it. This story arc, this beat, has no meaning to Rey. It is not necessary for Rey's story. It doesn't actually do anything except give you, the audience, a dozen voices that you recognize and can cling to because nostalgia, and it has meaning to you. Because this story is about you, not Rey. This isn't about extrapolating character and making meaningful decisions for someone that we can identify with. This is about going, here's all the stuff that you want. You want the approval of the Jedi, so therefore Rey does too. It's basically like, for all these people who have complained that Rey's a Mary Sue all this time, and we discussed in the Mary Sue episode where I was just like, look, so was Luke. The problem here is basically, yeah, there's some people who are sexist, and there's some people who have trouble seeing someone else's Mary Sue juxtaposed with their own and feeling threatened because their Mary Sue's not the most important one now. And there's some people that just, didn't think about it with Luke, and it's just like, well, of course Luke can do things because they were identifying with him, but now that they're not identifying with Rey, they have trouble. But this movie is basically all about taking Rey and being like, you're right, she wasn't good enough. You're right that she wasn't better than Luke. Let's make her inferior so that you can feel not threatened anymore because your Mary Sue's not in the spotlight. We're going to make this Mary Sue inferior to yours in every way, reliant on literally every Jedi that ever came before for her progression, even though they're not actually doing anything here. It's just to make you feel safely not threatened by her. Like, it's, ugh.
I love it when Chris gets like this.
Well, thank you. I'm glad someone does. I'm sure lots of the audience doesn't. But...
Well, I feel like this is somewhat cathartic for Chris.
Oh, it is, actually.
Yeah.
It's massively. So thank you all for attending my therapy sessions. Good storytelling is about setup and payoff. Bad storytelling pulls new stuff out of nowhere without any emotional context. Sometimes you can get away with it. Avatar: The Last Airbender does it all right at the end. It's like, okay, it has solid emotional context, so we can get away with the fact that it's a last second behind pull.
Well, it is in Avatar. It is a last second thing, but there is some precedent in the series already.
Oh, yeah.
That
With him
the
being
Dragon Turtle
nonviolent,
already, was the one who give it. It can take it away, and if it can take it away,
Well, we didn't find out it gave it until Korra, but yeah.
Well, yeah, but I don't know. I feel like it was, even though you're 100% right, it is a very last minute. Hey, let's have Aang be nonviolent.
Well, he's been nonviolent, as in killing.
But let's have him be nonviolent.
Let's give him a convenient out.
Yeah. Like it is definitely pulling that out of nowhere, but it felt they did a good enough job at hiding the nowhere that it came from that it still felt plausible.
Yeah.
Yep.
But here, we've gone through 4/5 of this movie and 8+ other movies, and then introduced the concept of the Sith possessing one another just completely out of left field. It's one of the most last-second behind pulls in cinematic history, and it makes no sense at all within the Star Wars universe. And the only reason it's there is to try and set up this I am Iron Man moment with Rey saying that she is all the Jedi. First of all, what does that even mean? She is them? No, they're just whispering to her like that there is no meaningful, they're not lending her power, or at least we're not shown that in any meaningful way. Like she just is another Jedi. She's not all the Jedi. Like it doesn't make any sense, but even then, don't forget that Rey's big moment here, her final one-liner, is literally her declaring that she can do it, she has value because of other more important people. Like...
Rey needs therapy.
Rey did, yeah. But she just got everything she wanted instead. Like, this is the most Mary Sue-ist Rey has ever been. It's just Mary Sue for the right people, so they're all happy with it. But... then Rey proceeds to hold up a lightsaber, and then hold up a second lightsaber, and wait for the problem to take care of itself. I've already, and there's no reason for us to care that Palpatine's dead, because why the F should we believe that he'll remain dead at this point? And don't worry, I didn't miss the meaning here. Rey is not just holding up a pair of lightsabers, she's holding up Luke and Leia's lightsabers. It's like symbolic and crap. It's not a plus, folks. Rey stands up, declares that she has value because of the important people, and then symbolically holds up the important people so that they can save her and the whole galaxy.
That's beautiful. I was wondering where you were going with that. That's beautiful.
Because Rey has no value and can do nothing on her own. And then Rey is dead for no reason. Don't stand too close to an exploding Sith, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, Vader was already injured and then was mostly
warnings.
machine and got zapped with a bunch of lightning. I get why he died. Qui-Gon got stabbed, Obi-Wan and Maul got bisected, Dooku got beheaded, Yoda got old, Luke put himself under a huge amount of strain, and he was probably easily the weakest, least understandable death of that lot. But even Luke had more reason behind his death than Rey. And the only reason Rey dies here is so that Kylo can bring her back, so that we can have a convenient redemption equals death, so that we don't have to deal with the consequences of his choices. Once again, Rey is only here. She dies to serve a purpose for someone else's story. But at least this time it's not one of the original characters. They kiss. There's next to no romance. It's, who cares? Case in point, Kylo dies and Rey just sort of goes, huh? Oh well. Like, we can't be arsed to give even half a centimeter of further romance beyond one kiss. No emotions, no nothing. She goes off, she hugs Finn and Poe. Here are some relationships that could have reasonably served a meaningful purpose in Rey's story, but they didn't. 90% of Poe and Rey's interactions have been borderline hostile, but and nothing happened to change
For
any
no
of that.
apparent reason,
Yeah.
by the way.
I didn't mind it. I don't mind that they, like, rub each other the wrong way. I thought that was nice and different, but now it's just gone, and nothing's changed, and there's no difference. And really, the only reason it happened in the first place is because people decided, like, right from the start, they're like, this is our new trio. Never mind the fact that Poe wasn't even meant to survive the first movie.
It wasn't even meant to be Poe.
And that he never interacted with Rey over the course of 2 movies until the end of The Last Jedi. They're a trio, you guys. Because this is the audience mapping the original trilogy going onto this and going, well, there's 3 of them. They're all attractive. There's 2 guys and 1 girl. Clearly, they are the trio. We have to do the same thing as before. Which is why we just sort of foisted in a relationship for them, but then did nothing with them, is because the audience is just already assuming, well, of course they have that dynamic, because Luke and Leia and Han did, without the romance. Or siblings, apparently. But at least this moment of hugging is genuinely more meaningful for Rey than what comes next. Welcome to Tatooine. Rey slides on a thing because she did that in the 7th movie, and we're confusing mirroring with meaning. She climbs back out, so apparently there's no reason to slide down that, and then buries Luke and Leia's lightsabers here. And if you've spent any time whatsoever on the internet, I'm sure you've heard plenty of whining about this. I'll just sum it up as this location is not an inherently good or meaningful one for Leia or even for Luke. Luke hated it here, Leia was here once, and it wasn't a great experience. But once again, this scene isn't taking place here because it's meaningful for the characters, it's here because it's meaningful to you, the audience. This is where your Star Wars began, so we're ending here as a cheap pander to you. That's right. Even the characters that this movie is brainlessly glorifying get shafted by this movie's concern for constructing an artifice for the audience, rather than telling a meaningful story about the characters. And then, Rey Skywalker. It's the final step in turning Rey into a faceless pedestal for holding up Luke and the other characters. But hey, let's look at what most people say about the meaning of the scene. It's about how no matter where you come from, you can become the good guy. No, Rey was already the good guy. Like, if you missed the fact that Rey has been the good guy for 3 whole movies...
Yeah, I'm not sure what trilogy
exactly.
you're watching.
No question about it. She's not a good guy because she's taken the name Skywalker. She's a guy because she's been fighting against evil. The fact that so much of the audience only recognizes that she's a hero now that she has the correct last name shows how disturbingly unsettled this movie is. It's about Rey finally finding a place and having a family. She was alone for most of her life, made some friends that apparently she doesn't really value, but now she got adopted and is the only remaining living member of her family, so she's effectively alone again. The movie literally ends with her walking off into the sunset, basically alone, just her and BB-8. And compare this to the ending of literally every single one of the original movies, or the ending of The Last Jedi. Like, Rey is alone. What this movie is really saying with Rey, whether it intended to or not, is 1, you're only important if you have significant heritage. Like, you have no inherent value in and of yourself. If you have done heroic things, it doesn't matter as much as the important people recognizing you as important. Like, The whole reason she was valuable, the whole reason everyone was interested in this girl with the Force is because she was a Palpatine. And there's a lot of people that are like, oh, no, she's still important in and of herself. It's like, no, she's not. She's important because of whose loins she sprang from. And that's it. And if your significant heritage is the wrong heritage and you're doomed to be a baddie, well, then just suck up to the people with the right family name. Step back, give them all the glory, make sure you never overshadow or even just stand on an equal pedestal with them, and then once you've done proper obeisance, they'll finally deign to acknowledge you and maybe even let you use the family name once they're done with it. I mean, and seriously, look at this story within the context of any real-life analog. Classism. This movie basically says, oh, the last movies had this lower-class hero getting too uppity. Let's make her secretly upper-class after all, so that's why it's okay for her to have the magic, but not the proper ruling upper-class. And then show off that if someone of lower upper-class knows their place and respects their betters, we might let them into the real upper-class eventually. But only once we're done and moved on, because we can't actually show them to be on the same level as us. Oh, no. Like sexism. What? These movies want to make a woman a hero on par with the original male hero? Well, let's reframe her significance as coming from her male ancestor and then have her feel inferior and unworthy compared to the hero for no reason at all and just have her forget any good she's done before this. And then, after she's kept to her lane and let the hero overshadow her for long enough, then he'll reward her by letting her take his name. So meaningful. Oh, but it's not sexist because it's Leia, too. Let's talk about Leia for a second. We're gonna skip over to Leia before we do Kylo Ren. This is the first time in the history of Star Wars movies that the movies have really genuinely put Leia on the same pedestal as Luke and Han.
Yeah, very true.
Do they do that by saying, oh yeah, look at all the good Leia did over the course of her life. Look at General Leia, the only person who was willing to fight against the First Order when they appeared, who held everything together. Oh, no. They make up an entirely new BS story about, oh, she was a Jedi after all, and she had visions that told her the future, and that's why she plotted all this out, because she wasn't already worthy of being the hero, being on equal standing with the heroes. Like, and then we're doing this all as part of Rey knowing her place, basically. Like, this is like a group that has continually shafted the lone black dude in their group until another younger black dude comes along and they're like, whoa, this guy thinks he's as good as us? And people are like, well, that's racist. It's like, oh, no, we've got a black guy here all along. See, look, we're going to give him all the accolades that we haven't been giving him for years to show how not racist we are, to justify our being racist to the movie.
Are you talking about Billy D. Williams and Lando?
Yeah, I wasn't even going to get into Billy D in this, but yeah, I mean...
Because what you just described...
Yeah, they're basically just lifting up Leia so that they can justify dissing Rey. She's basically Raymond Holt. And it's not great. Okay. So Kylo. This will go a lot quicker with Kylo because it's a lot shorter because there's nothing there. So movie begins, Palps is back somehow, Kylo's hunting him down, blah blah blah, makes perfect sense. Kylo isn't a Sith. The last movie made it pretty clear that while he is absolutely on the dark side, he doesn't care much for the Jedi or the Sith, for the light side or the dark side. He's not viewing it that way. He has no reason to align himself with Palps, and as the current ruler of the galaxy, so far as we understand things, he definitely wouldn't allow another power to rise up and threaten his position.
And Palpatine being a threat to his position makes very good sense for why Kylo would want to snuff that out. So sure.
Yeah, and then he meets Palps, and Palps says, oh, your abusive, manipulative former master that you hated so much you murdered him? That was me, all along. I've been abusing and manipulating you for your whole life. Really just piling on the reasons for Kylo to kill him there, and then Kylo doesn't. For no reason.
Which is super weird because Kylo was willing to kill his manipulative, abusive,
exactly. He's already killed this guy once.
Yeah.
He doesn't need the fleet that Palps has, and probably could have taken it anyway after he killed Palps. He doesn't need Palps' help. He has no interest in helping him. He's not even planning on going along with his plan. He explicitly tells Rey later, oh, I'm not going along with his plan. I have my own plan. Which is what? Like, there was no plan. He had nothing. We're just throwing out all of his character, all of his motivations and history, and replacing it with nothing. He's a hollow shell of a character. He puts his helmet back together. Apparently someone gathered up all the pieces of this helmet from the wreckage of Snoke's ship and has saved them for an entire year. And now he puts his helmet back together, again, for no reason.
I'll push back on that.
Sure.
Given his temper tantrums that we've seen in 7 and 8, I think the cleaning crews are probably like Johnny on the spot.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
So like they like, you know, the thing opens and he's like, prepare my ship, and there's those two guys standing there. You know, one of them like got on their like Apple Watch and was like, we need a cleaning crew.
We should
in
probably
this
save these.
elevator.
You know what? Yeah,
Just
and that's
in case,
legit. And that's even that's not a real complaint. You know, that's just silly.
So I could see that they're like, you know,
sure.
Put those in a bag, like in a Ziploc bag, in case he wants them later.
And then he came back a year later and was, where's my helmet? And someone was like, oh, thank goodness for Greg.
Yeah.
I am so glad that Greg did that.
Janitor number 2, Greg, get that Ziploc bag.
Too bad Greg got murdered for his, underperformance earlier. But does someone know where he kept that? No. But it serves no more purpose. Like, he spends over half the movie without the helmet on anyway.
Yeah.
Like, in the last movie, him destroying the helmet was a pretty clear symbolic gesture of his moving past his desire to simply be what his grandfather had been and to find his own way. Like, he's sick of being overshadowed by his heritage.
I don't think it's that deep. I think the symbolism is JJ going, we're going to take the broken pieces of Episode 7 that Episode 8 left in its wake, and we're going to put them back together.
It's even worse than that, because I've heard him talk about this. He just liked the mask.
Yeah, he really just
the
liked
mask is cool.
Yeah,
it's a cool design. I'll give him
and
that.
I'm not going to lie that the red lines look pretty metal too, but
cool,
but it's really as that's the thing is you can't just do things in stories. They will have meaning whether you intend them to or not. And I guess the best meaning I can find here is this is symbolic of him going, never mind, I'm just going to be Darth Vader again, but not as well built as the original. That's literally what that helmet symbolizes.
He needs to lose 3/4 of his limbs first.
Yeah, that too. It's also dumb how the first few Kylo scenes try to set it up as though he's tight with the Knights of Ren. Like, they're with him when he rebuilds his helmet, they follow him to a meeting, they come with him to Pasana, and then never do anything at any of those places. They're just here to be like, oh no, he's totally tight with these guys. Well, and they're really just here because they were mentioned in the first movie. People complained that they didn't show up in the second one. And so now we gotta have them here, but we don't have anything to do with them, so we're just gonna have them show up a couple times and then be the faceless mooks that he kills at the end because we gotta have some sort of fight scene at the end, and Palps isn't gonna use a lightsaber at this point because we attached a crane to him, so what can you do? He has his first Force Skype call with Rey, and there's nothing here. I already mentioned this, that it's just like there's none of the dialogue gives us any indication of any sort of past relationship, anything that's developed since the last movie. It's really just, Grr, I'm going to totally turn you to the dark side. Grr, no, you're horrible and we'll stop you. It basically demonstrates that the relationship is back to the point it was at the beginning of Episode 8. Surprise, surprise. Which would be fine if it weren't for the fact that their relationship is the central key to the entire freaking plot working. So, yes, he does tell Rey he's not going to kill her like Palps wants because he has his own plan. There isn't one. Palps didn't have one. Hux didn't have one. The writers didn't have one. There's just no plans here. He grabs the necklace. It's fine. Really convenient. Redundant because the stormtroopers spot them on the planet 5 seconds later anyway.
That's true.
You know what JJ said to the Disney execs when they asked him what the plan for this episode was? It's a trap! And then he ran away.
I believe it.
He could sense that. Wait, why are you asking me this? No, run away!
So he and the Knights of Ren land on Pasan. They pose for a bit dramatically on a plateau.
They sure do.
And then he gets back in his tie, leaves them behind to try and run Rey down. We all know this is dumb. This has been complained about on the internet so much. It's like he doesn't want to kill her, but then he tries to run her down, which is pretty obviously fatal. His ship explodes. He gets up and walks away without so much as a smudge. And then he's flying that same TIE fighter later in the movie. Yep.
I mean,
oh man,
those things are manufactured, mass manufactured. That's
sure,
fine.
But it literally has the holocron in it still, or the Wayfinder or whatever. So apparently he got a different ship for his trip to Pasan than he had flown before, and then switched back to his original one after this one got destroyed.
The thing
the Wayfinder.
Maybe. Oh, that's true. He did have time. Sure. I like that.
And he was fine enough. I mean, it was probably
But the whole
fine.
running her over thing is super funny, because
yeah.
he would have to run her over with the wings, but he's centered the cockpit on her. So it's like, the only way that you could run her over is by literally crashing your own ship and hoping that your spiraling wreckage takes her out.
She might have been tall enough to be hitting the head. I'd have to look at it again.
Yeah, I don't know.
Not really.
Well, I mean. So then he comes out.
If so, his wings would have to be on the ground, and at that speed.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're willing to rip your wings off and hope that you're spinning with like 100 G's cockpit hits her, or something like that. It's so dumb.
So then they force arm wrestle over the ship. And he references later, he says, like, this is why I pushed you, is trying to get her to edge toward the dark side or something like that. But it's like, You pushed her by holding on to a ship. Like, you're sort of denying her what she wants. And then in all your interactions later, you never do anything like that. Like, you're just sort of there. You never attack her. You're never, like, there's no real engagement here. This is not a Palpatine level plot of trying to turn someone to the dark side. This is just sort of, whatever, you know, if you make someone emotional, I guess they'll turn to the dark side, whatever. That's all the thought we need into this. His minions capture Chewbacca, and he doesn't care, I guess. Maybe no one mentioned it to him. Like, I mean, he knows who Chewie is. That I think that would be pretty significant to him, but whatevs. Next time he's involved in the story, it's when they force Skype while she's on the Star Destroyer. No development of the relationship here. It's just him going, "Ooh, I'm hinting at something. Ooh." And I didn't bring it up in our last two interactions because we hadn't reached this part of the movie. Ooh. And I'm not going to tell you this time because this is more of a face-to-face convo. I mean, we're face-to-face and can even physically interact, but more face-to-face than this. Okay, now it's been 30 seconds. Now it's time. On Kylo's end, I don't know how Adam Driver managed to say this all with a straight face. I didn't lie. They chose to be nobody. Yeah, whatever. But, again, falls apart with a simple question. Why? If Kylo knew about this, why didn't he tell her in Episode 8? Aside from the obvious that this wasn't the story then. Yeah. If he found out since then, why didn't he tell her earlier? This is the fourth time they've interacted in this movie alone. Why wait?
And not to mention that if he knew in Episode 8, wouldn't that have been a far more convincing argument to her? Look, I'm already on the dark side. Your grandpa is Palpatine. This is your destiny. Why don't you just stop fighting it and join me?
He didn't know at that point.
Yeah,
Palpatine tells him at the beginning of the movie.
Wow. It's supposed to be
It's Luke and Leia that knew beforehand.
Yeah. But even then, this is their fourth interaction in the movie so far. Like, why not tell her sooner? And again, what is he hoping to achieve here? This falls apart for the same reasons as her being concerned about it. It's like, you're going to tell me that Kylo Ben Solo Ren, son of Leia Organa and Han Solo, nephew of Luke, grandson of Vader, can't grasp the idea that your family doesn't define you? When he literally, his whole arc in the last movie was him going, "I'm not defined by my family, screw all of them"? Like, no, he gets this concept. It's beyond bizarre for him to spend the last movie going, "Hey, kill the past. You know, let the past die, kill it if you have to. None of it matters. We're not tied by the past." And then spend this movie going, "Oh, you're a Palpatine. You have to be a Palpatine now." It's just dumb. It's so dumb. It's the very definition of plot dictating character action over actual character dictating. Like, we've just abandoned who he was in the last two movies. They fight, it's boring, it's all to get us oh, wait, sorry. I skipped ahead, sorry. So, they both have to be their grandparents for some reason. Shows up at the Death Star wreckage. He's trying to force her to come with him. Again, why? What's that going to do? What is going to Palpatine going to do here? He was saying earlier he's pushing her to try and get her toward the dark side. So is he like, yeah, once I get you to Palpatine, it'll just be flipping a switch and you'll be evil now? Like, why is that more useful to him than just trying to push her to the dark side himself? Like, basically because, well, that's what they did in the originals. So we got to do that now. It's really just an arbitrary excuse for him to destroy the Wayfinder, which is just an arbitrary excuse for her to attack him, so that we can get to the next bit. Like, it's the definition of plot dictating character behavior instead of character behavior dictating plot.
I think the only thing I can think of as a possibility is that he wanted to turn her to the dark side so that they could go after Palpatine together.
Maybe.
But even still, that doesn't really feel like he would need her.
Mm-mm.
Or even for her to be on the dark side, because again, that should be her goal anyway.
Well, and again, in the last movie, his attitude was basically like, screw the light side and the dark.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't about that. This is just about us being who we want to be. And so for him to suddenly be like, "Oh yeah, now I'm going to turn you to the dark side," it's like, oh god, I mean, I shouldn't be surprised that they're just ignoring his development in the last movie, because they didn't really understand his development in the last movie. But okay, but they fight on the Death Star wreckage. It's pretty boring. It's all to get us to Mommy. I am floored, seriously, by how stupid bad this is. Like, it's unclear, confusing. Probably the number one question people came out of the theater with after seeing this was, what was up with Leia and Kylo stopping the fight to look back? Like, why did he stop and look back there? What was going on with Leia there? Nobody knew. Then Rey stabbed him, healed him, tells him she wants to take Ben's hand and runs off, and then Kylo's good again. Just like that. And this is the biggest and stupidest why of the movie for me. Like, just why? Lots of people have come up with lots of explanations for what happened here and why it suddenly changed him back to the light, and none of them really hold up. This is really people inserting whatever arc they've been mapping onto this, whatever cliche story they've decided is what's going on here. They just map this moment to that and say, oh yeah, this is totally what was going on all in that. But the best part about this moment for me is that it's not like other moments where I say people are inserting stuff into the narrative that wasn't there. Because I know usually when I do that, people just go, nuh-uh, it's totally there, and ignore me. Like, I've dealt with it a lot. But in this case, the writers have explained exactly what they were going for. Chris Terrio was interviewed and told us that this scene was Leia, quote, reaching out through the Force to awaken the good side of her son. Or as I put it in another episode, she flipped his good-evil switch back to good with the Force.
It's amazing she didn't think
that
before then.
Is what the writers intended here. If you're pushing any other narrative, then you are officially putting stuff in here that wasn't intended. And you are absolutely right to, because the official narrative is hella stupid. But that is why all the many and varied explanations for what went down here fall so flat. They're not here. It's really not there. The actual writing is just horrible. And I meant to say earlier, like, if you want to ignore stuff in the movie, insert stuff into the movie to create something you like, hey, cool. Go right ahead. That's not what I have a problem with. I have a problem with you coming to me and saying it was totally a good movie because of what you made it into. No, the writers made a bad movie. They gave you a bad movie, and you imagined something better out of it. Kudos to you. You're a better storyteller than J.J. Abrams and Chris Terrio. But they gave us a very, very bad movie. I mean, I just imagine that in any other context. Like, you go to an Italian restaurant and you get just the worst pasta you have ever tasted.
Been there.
And you're just like, this is disgusting. Like, who puts carrots in spaghetti? Like, are these peaches? This meat is like rock hard. What is going on here? And then your friend, meanwhile, is just picking everything out of there that doesn't taste good. And then they pull out their own set of like seasonings and season it up a bit. And then they're like, oh yeah, that's better. That was a good meal. And it's like, no. That was not a good meal.
You were served something terrible,
and you were
able to make it better.
And then when you try it, you're like, no, this still isn't that good. Like, it's palatable at this point, but it's not a good. We still would have been better just getting a Stouffer spaghetti and heating it up in the microwave.
Oh, that's bad pasta.
Yep.
Stouffer's do spaghetti?
There's a reason.
I sure hope not.
They do, yes.
Oh.
There's a reason I chose pasta. I knew that would hit home.
Yeah, I'm like trembling over here.
Yeah. The three primary reasons, the other three primary reasons why people read
It's funny though, because you're hypothetical. I've actually done that. This is years ago. Maybe even before we had kids. This is like really anyway. But a friend had graciously invited us over to her house to like play some like Xbox or something like that and just hang out, you know. And so we were done. We were doing that, and it was fun. And she's like, "Oh, yeah, it's getting late. You guys hungry? Sure. Oh, you guys want pasta?" And I'm like, "Oh, yes, I love pasta," forgetting that what pasta means to me is very different from what pasta means to other people.
Yes.
And so this friend, you know, set some noodles on to boil and takes out some Bertolli's Alfredo sauce, and I'm just like, oh, okay, guess we're giving this a shot. And, you know, puts it in a pan to heat up, and I taste it, and I'm just like, wow, that's truly awful. And I was like, hey, what spices do you have? Because we've got to do something about this sauce before we ingest this. So added some here and there, a little bit of, you know, basil and garlic and things like that. And I brought it from inedible to edible. Mm-hmm. Not great, though.
Yeah.
Not great.
Yep. It's like if it were a car, it's like, now it's running, but it's not something you want to drive around in.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, that's fine if you want to do that. Like, hey, you're getting more enjoyment out of the film than you would have. You're getting more enjoyment out of that meal than you would have. Cool. It's just don't come to someone who's saying, well, that was a really bad meal, and go, no, it was totally good. What are you talking about? It wasn't.
Yeah.
It's demonstrably not. Three other primary reasons why people's reads of this scene fall flat. One is that they fail to take into account what came before. Like, as in, Rey already tried to get Kylo to become good, and he wouldn't. In The Last Jedi, he chose supreme leadership over redemption. So any explanation
she didn't realize
for
he had a good bad switch.
well, yes, any explanation for this scene doesn't need to just explain his change of heart. It needs to explain why his heart changed this time, but not last time. What is different here from before? And almost no explanation I hear for this scene ever takes that into account. And they'll be like, "Oh, this is why he changed there," and I'm like, "Okay, but that was present in the last one. Why now?" Also, what came before? Kylo turned to the dark side because he thought Luke betrayed him. Like, it was actually a pretty valid reason to turn away from the light.
Yeah, for sure.
No redemption for Kylo can actually be complete without dealing with this issue, but this movie's approach to it is, it never happened. How dare you suggest Saint Skywalker ever had a bad thought? This isn't the motivation you're looking for. Move along. And
I wonder if he also imagined Luke Skywalker
Probably.
forgiving himself off screen.
probably,
Yeah.
we just, he got the chance to forgive Luke off screen, just pretended Luke was there, yeah. Third is that Kylo has had basically no narrative in this movie. Like, he's the worst kind of villain, the kind without any concrete, understandable motivations. He doesn't want Rey dead, but he tries to kill her. He wants her turned to the dark side, which doesn't match from his motivations from the last movie, but it's completely unclear what he actually thinks this will accomplish. He just flip-flops around being grim and making threats, and because he's such a weak character in this movie, no change in his character can be effective. It's just another flip-flop. Some of the explanations I've seen for this... number one, love. Look, I've already said they acted the hell out of this, but it's not in the movie, and we all know it. We all know that the writers did not put any romance here. The movie is not selling any sort of romance. I would have loved for this movie to be about an actual developing relationship between these people to a point where Kylo could realize that he is willing to change for her or in something. I'll set aside the fact that changing for another person is historically not a great method of lasting change. But they didn't do that. It's not there. I had a friend insist that it was because Rey explained that she wanted to take Ben's hand, not Kylo's. And he, understood, oh, she wants me to be good, and so now I'll do that for her. And I was just like, really? Come on.
How many abusive boyfriends have said and done that exact thing only to continue being douchey?
Well, and even that, it's not that...
For reals.
For me, it's the concept that he didn't already understand that she wanted him to be good. It's like, okay, in The Last Jedi, he's telling her, let the past die, kill it if you have to, take my hand, You have no place anywhere, but I will offer you a place. I want a connection, this, that, and the other. And she's like, no, you gotta go save my friends. And he's just like, no, forget that. Forget the Jedi and the Sith. Forget the light and the dark. Forget all of it. Let it all die. Let's just do our own thing. Is him being like, no, let's just not try and be good or bad because that's all a sham. And she went, no, don't do this. And he said, you're still holding on. Which implies he knows she's holding on to the concept of being good. That's what that line means. And then she chose, nope, I'm gonna be good. He gets that she wants to be good and she wants him to be good. He already knew that. This is not a revelation for him now. It's like, oh, you wanted to take Ben's hand? Well, let me just get out my alter ego here for you. Ben and Kylo are the same person. He doesn't suddenly change because he goes by a different name. Sorry. And because she healed him. Yeah, she also stabbed him. I mean, to paraphrase Belcar Bitterleaf, thank you for so generously healing the wound that I only had because of you in the first place. And frankly, this is the best of the explanations. That this is okay, he's shocked because she actually stabbed him because he drove her to that point or something, and then relieved that she heals him or something, but even then, it's still really weak. And that's the best of what I've heard so far. And I'm not saying that couldn't have worked if they'd done the work. If they'd done the work to show us what this is doing to them and everything. But they didn't. It's just the pacing of this movie is so fast that we just have to run past everything and we never get anything. And then we get the Han scene. We all love Harrison Ford. And just like with Carrie Fisher, a lot of fans get super emotional just because someone familiar is on screen. I've heard so many people talk about I was sobbing as soon as I saw Leia in this movie. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm a heartless husk. I don't care. I was sad when she died too, but just seeing her on screen is not enough to make me blubber because I've seen her on screen and I will continue to see her on screen for ages to come, assuming I live that long. But for me, this scene is dramatically weakened be by the fact that there's no reason to believe that this is really Han. Like we were joking about earlier. Like, we've never seen non-Force users come back from death, which is why this movie even explicitly states that that's not what's happening here. He is just a memory, quote unquote. And like I talked about this with that same friend too, where she was just like, "Oh, it's real." And I was like, "Why?" Like, there's no context with, like, even if they had just made this a dream, I could have bought that better than just, like, he's straight up hallucinating this or imagining it. Like, and I get that a lot of people really want to believe in redemption and all. I do too. But this is not how redemption works. I have spoken with a lot of actual real-life murderers, both convicted and not.
Really?
Yes.
I did not know that.
I served my mission in Eastern
that's
Russia.
True. I forgot.
That's right.
It's astounding how often you encounter
That's true.
murderers.
Actually, now that I think about that, I have too.
Yeah. and almost all of them, like, I was there as a missionary. I was preaching God, and almost all of them came to me looking for some form of absolution. And that was the most difficult thing about talking to them, was just that I could not offer them that. I could not guarantee that. Like, doctrinally, that is not a thing that is necessarily available to murderers. Like, yes, there is potential redemption, but we are not authorized to give that. We do not sell indulgences here. And these were painful, harrowing, tragic conversations. So I personally found it straight up offensive when this movie went, well, he hallucinates a conversation where his most personally significant victim, and the most significant to the audience, just forgives him, and then he's all better. That is not how repentance and redemption work. And it is straight up weak and cowardly that this movie chose to reduce the process to that. And I'm sure that a lot of people will try and justify it with, well, you were okay with it with Vader. It's like, no, shut up if you're thinking that.
I would love, like, going to, like, the state prison and, like, so you feel really guilty about, like, murdering this child or whatever. Have you tried imagining that they forgive you?
I mean, and you know what? I could see that as being a helpful step in, like, forgiving yourself.
Yeah.
But even then, I don't know if I'd encourage that.
Yeah,
like, that's not great.
Like, but how weird is that to be like, well, have you tried imagining that they just forgive you? Because if you do that, then it's all good. You don't have to feel guilty anymore.
Yeah.
Like,
and if you think this is the same as Vader, no, this is them mapping Vader onto this. But Vader had a reason. The movie had already established that he cared about his son, that he felt like it was too late for him to change back, that he was loyal to his master. So when Palps was torturing Luke to death, we all know exactly what the conflict in Vader's head is and why he switches. B, Vader hasn't committed the level of atrocities on screen, at least at the time, that Kylo had. Like, when you think about it, it's like, they both stood by and watched genocide happen. That's not great. Vader had Leia tortured, but Kylo personally tortured people. Like, that's and they showed it. It's definitely a step for the worse. And, like, Kylo has straight up Vader killed his own insubordinates. He killed bad guys, but we never saw him kill a single good guy, except for Obi-Wan. And Obi-Wan planned that. Yeah. Whereas, it's like, Kylo's killed several people, and it's like, oh yeah, he imagines one of them forgiving them. And it's the only one with a name. Oh wait, Laura Santeca. Whoops. But so he hasn't committed the same level of atrocities on screen at the time that Kylo had, and his choice happened quickly at the climax of the moment, and then he dies before the audience can have time to question anything too much. Like, it's just like, oh well, maybe that was a real redemption, maybe not. They definitely make it into a real deathbed repentance because they show his spirit later, and okay, I don't think that was a great choice personally, but I understand why they did it for a narrative completion bit.
Did they show Kylo's spirit later?
No. They showed Vader's in the original.
Right.
Kylo, on the other hand, has no clear reason for switching sides. It happens more slowly, with him imagining his dead father forgiving him, which explicitly reminds us of Kylo's more severe crimes, without offering any actual absolution. And then we're left with a full third of the movie to go, with plenty of time to think about the fact that this didn't work. Not that they don't try to keep the audience from thinking about the fact that Kylo became good for no reason at all. Like, they're definitely avoiding that. There's a reason he has no actual dialogue after that point in the movie. Last third of the movie, final act, Kylo says one word, and it is, ow.
Yeah.
And that is it.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
One of the two main characters in this film franchise. Wow. This trilogy is about this dyad, and he is done the second he's redeemed to the good side. He does not say anything again.
Wow.
And it's because if he'd talked at all, it would have given us some glimpse into his increasingly ill-defined thought process, and everyone would have realized just how flimsily dumb his redemption actually was.
Wow.
That's why he doesn't use his position as supreme leader to try and order his troops to turn against the Emperor's forces or just to stand down. because he is still Supreme Leader, and
Yeah.
most of his forces have no reason to listen to Palpatine.
Yeah, that's true.
The writers had no idea what was
That's
going on.
astoundingly bad.
Yes, and they had no idea what was going on in his head when he was a villain, and they have even less of one now that he's not. His sole remaining motivation is help Rey, which is basically them trying to draw out the process of Vader's choice to save Luke through an entire act, which leaves Kylo with nothing to do. A lot of people have shown a lot of love online for all the ways that Kylo's movements echo Han's in this third act, because people are suckers for the familiar. I get that. Now that he's not evil, he's so much like his father, they cry. So this character spends 2.5 movies trying to escape the shadow of his lineage, and his reward is to just be Han Solo Part 2. Congratulations, Kylo.
Wow.
Screw you and your character. What the audience wants is for you to just be your dad now. This is not meaningful resolution. As with Rey, it's not designed with the character in mind. It's designed to pander to audience nostalgia. This character spent so long fighting against being like the characters we love, but now he's accepted his proper place of just being that all over again.
They should have just gone whole hog with that and had his last words before he dies. Just he looks at Rey and he's like, "I love you," and then she just says, "I know."
You know? No, it wouldn't have been better. I would have just been like, "Oh, why?" That might have killed me, actually. Then he gets tossed down a hole because the writers have no idea what to do with him while they're waiting for him to finish Vader's story. So he climbs out, freaking resurrects Rey, and then dies because redemption equals death because lazy cowardice. A lot of people tout this online as meaningful because a Skywalker finally saved someone they loved, and they did it by turning to the light side instead of the dark. Counterpoints. That has never been Kylo's motivation, ever. That's you foisting Vader onto him. Understandable, given that's what the movie's doing. But at no point until the very end of this movie has he been concerned with saving anyone, let alone anyone he loved. Quite the opposite, in fact. The final resolution for a character who spent so long trying to escape the shadow of his lineage is to resolve an issue his grandfather had, not him. It's not about these characters, it's about the OG. And point 2, Vader already did this when he saved Luke.
I was just gonna say, didn't we already do this?
Vader resolved his own damn arc. He doesn't need Kylo to do it here. It's just redundant. We've been going long. I'm not even gonna go into all the details of how this really tears apart most people's narratives about this movie. Like, you have to ignore so many piles of things. Really, this is just about going, oh, a lot of people were really upset that we did our own thing, that we tried to do something new and creative when they just wanted that familiar blanket of the same thing over again. So here you go. But putting that blanket over here actually kind of makes a movie that is saying some really unpleasant things about its characters and kind of its audience too. And it's not great. And again, like I said earlier, this movie is all about glorifying Luke and Leia, but it actually kind of shafts them. I mean, the ending of the last movie is Luke standing up to the First Order and people telling legends about Luke. It's the spark has been lit. And then this movie comes in and is just like, oh no, just kidding. That didn't do anything. Like, they're basically still in the same situation they were before, just this little tiny resistance with no hope whatsoever. And then everyone shows up because Lando came in and called in his chits. But Luke's sacrifice did almost nothing. It did save these people, so that half of them could not have any screen time. But, but, you know, at least the ones that we care about are here, at least physically, even if their character doesn't resemble what they were in the last 2 movies, including the movies that JJ himself wrote. Anyway, sorry. But yeah, like, that's not great. Like, Last Jedi is about how important and great and inspiring Luke is. Force Awakens and Rise of Skywalker are like, nah, whatever. He had no real lasting effect on the universe. But this is a movie that's supposed to be glorifying him, and it's just because it's doing it in the most shallow manner. And again, like, you got the whole thing with Luke and Leia not telling Rey about her parentage. It's like, that doesn't reflect well on them if you actually think about it. And we're giving Leia a sudden Jedi arc out of nowhere and saying, like, oh no, she was a Jedi all along. That makes her valid now. That's not good. That's not respectful of Leia. Like, Luke's last words to Kylo were, see you around, kid, like, which heavily implied that he's going to be reaching out to Kylo even from the afterlife. They have no interactions in this movie whatsoever, so apparently he got to the afterlife and was just like, wait a minute, I'm dead. What do I care about that world now? Screw that kid. And then, you know, it's like, with the not paying attention to details of, we're going to bury their lightsabers in a place they both hate because it's meaningful to the audience, but not to them. Like, If you actually think about what this movie is saying about these characters, it's pretty horrible. Why wasn't Luke here for Rey? Why wasn't Leia here for Rey? Why weren't they telling her the things she needed to know? Why weren't they telling her, hey, you're valid in and of yourself. You don't need the approval of all the Jedi. Luke has literally already declared that he won't be the last Jedi. He's already declared her his worthy successor. She doesn't need to prove herself worthy. But we just are gonna do that because no reason. Like, because this movie is more concerned about glorifying, and it leaches into all the others, where it's just like, oh, Poe can't get there to pick up Finn and Janna quick enough, but Lando's got this covered because he's better. It's like, oh, Poe's going through the same thing he did in the last one, except less. Like, Poe has already struggled with the realities of leadership and earned a right to lead, but now all of a sudden he's like, oh crap, I can't do this without Leia. And then Lando tells him, oh, but we had each other, that's why you can do it. Which I'm kind of sitting there like, did you? I mean, Lando's been shafted by this entire trilogy, and now all of a sudden you're going to tell me that oh no, he was totally there the whole time, everyone. Like, it's not well thought out, and it's actually, when you look at it, it's implying the exact opposite. It's implying that the implication overall is that Lando has no place among these people. He was never glorified like they are until the last movie, where it only happened because the character we were going to glorify got killed, or died. Like, the person, not the character. The actress passed away. And it's like, oh, well, I guess now we'll let Lando tag in. Like, really? That is the biggest middle finger to Billy D. Williams ever. It's horrible. And so this movie is all about glorifying him and them, but really it's just shafting them the whole time. And it shafts the new characters in order to do that. Like, nobody comes out of this looking good. Palpatine is a shriveled husk of what he used to be. He's a senile, doddering old man instead of a cunning, manipulative, and they just sort of substitute, oh, he's enormously powerful, when that's never been a thing about Palpatine. Just to substitute in. So, if you wondered why Rise of Skywalker has such a low critical rating, this is why. It is an utter mess from beginning to end. Every implication of what its story is telling is actually really bad if you dig in. Like, Last Jedi, I would hope that I've shown by this point, The Last Jedi is a movie that gets better the more you dig into it. It's what I love about it. The more you think about it, the more it holds up. And this is a movie that compared to that's a quilt, a finely made quilt. The closer you look at it, the more detailed and amazing it is. And this is a quilt made of wet tissue paper. Like, if you even so much as touch this, it just shatters. It just falls apart. And comparing it to the prequels, Anakin's fall to the dark side is rushed. It has, that we did not put in the work of doing this, just like I'm saying with so much of what's going on with Kylo and Rey. There is no romance here. There is no work done. We're not showing the story. But at least Anakin's turn to the dark side makes some sense. We can all see why he did it, even if they didn't actually show it properly developing. We can all understand, oh, I'm afraid for the people I love, especially because I already lost someone this way and it set me off once. I'm going to turn to the dark side because I think it will help. That makes sense. Basic character motivations are at least intact. The basic storyline at least makes the barest of sense. Whereas this movie contradicts itself left and right, up and down, backward and forward. It is just a chaotic mess. And so, the prequels are like a puzzle that's been partway put together and is missing a ton of pieces, but this is just a jumble of pieces from all over that nobody's even tried to put together because they don't fit. And someone's hammered them together even though they don't fit. It's not good. So, if you sat through that and you did like Rise of Skywalker, wow, thank you. I hope I haven't soured your day too badly, because I know how that goes just listening to someone tear apart something you like. And if you already disliked it, then hey, thanks for being here with us and getting validated. But this isn't even all I could say about Rise of Skywalker, but it is the heart of what I wanted to say. I may, if people are interested, I may still want to do the episode in the future where we really dig into why the I am Iron Man moments and the on your left moments don't work. Yeah. That would be significantly shorter than this one, but yeah, and I mean, there's tons of stuff with Poe and Finn and Janna and everything that doesn't work, but it's all the same basic stuff as these. And very few people are justifying this movie by going like, oh, but look at how well Finn's story works. It doesn't, and nobody's there for that. So I feel like this demonstrates pretty soundly why Rise of Skywalker is the lowest rated movie of the Star Wars universe.
Okay. Well, thanks for that.
Thank you. Thank you both, and thank you all.
And be sure to follow us on Twitter @MoreCivilized, and join the Facebook group, A More Civilized Podcast. We've got all kinds of good memeage going on there. And if you are feeling extra generous and want to help us pay for our podcast hosting and prizes for you guys for different things we've got planned and whatnot, you can give us money at patreon.com/morecivilized.
I mean, there are a surprising number of little fees
Yes.
that come with hosting podcasts.
There sure are.
Yes.
Would help.
Yes.
So, first off, for
Meme
this
of the
week, yes, our new section here at the end of the podcast that it's the old section that we're redubbing, Meme of the Week, our favorite meme. And actually, I had a hard time cutting it down to just
There's been
one
some good
this
stuff.
week. There's been some
True
really
story.
good stuff.
All this
So-
quarantine, man. People have nothing left to do but meme.
It's true.
I envy them, really.
I know.
I mean,
right?
I don't want to brag about, yes, I still have gainful employment and stuff, but it is just my wife and I are still working almost as many hours as we were before. My kids were already homeschooled, so it's nothing's changed, and I'm got all these people being like, I need binging recommendations, and I'm like, what? Why? How? How do you all have so much free time? I'm so jealous.
By the way, binge our show.
Yeah,
That's right.
and thank you to the people who have. We've seen an impressive spike in downloads
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
last
that's true.
weekend, so...
Yeah. So first, I would like to point out the YouTube video posted by Scott Stevens.
Scott Stevens.
Yeah, my
posted
buddy
the-
Scott.
The Jedi went down to Tatooine,
Ah, yes, yes.
which is,
It's good.
I thought it was hilarious.
Yes.
And then we are also going to shout out David Bryson for his re-edit of a popular meme comic strip, the brain talking to the sleeping person
Ah, yes.
cartoon. It reads, the little brain is labeled Chris and Ross, and he's saying, do you know what kind of news it is? And there's a sleeping person that's just it's just regular news. And then it goes back to the brain. No, it's the newsy news. And then it's Kyler. Eyes wide open in the dark.
He has no idea how accurate that is.
Yeah.
That's every episode we record, that's what it's like. Ugh.
No, we really need to make that more concrete. We need to slip a speaking device into their
Oh,
bedroom
no!
or something,
Stop!
and then at 2 a.m. Watch with binoculars outside the house until the lights go off in their room, and then just wait a few minutes and then be like, newsy news. And Kyler's just what the? I'm gonna kill them.
I hate you
What we'll
so
do-
bad.
What we'll do is we'll get Christina to use a noise machine, like those sleeping noise
Yes.
machines, but one that we can record, and it'll just be us whispering.
Yes. We should
I
record
hate you
newsy
so
news
bad.
and then play it backward.
Yeah. we we're coming up with some great ideas here, Chris. I mean, if anyone can help us make some of those reality, let's talk.
And Brian Bass, thanks for the follow.
Yes, absolutely. I was getting to that.
Oh,
That was our
I
shout
thought
out.
you were done.
Yeah. No, and that's our second portion. We'd like to welcome aboard new followers this week, being Brian Bass, who's followed us on Twitter. Anyway, with that, you can follow me on Twitter at Random Paladin, where we can have a good time.
Yes. You can find me on Twitter at Itinerant Baxter, and you can find my author website at writerinthehat.com, where you can find links to a lot of my writing that you can buy and one or two free stories.
Well, there you go. Until next time,
May the Force be with you.
Always.
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 I'm Anna Graves, and thank you for listening to a more civilized podcast.
All right. Well, that's it.
Yes. Thank you, gentlemen. Nice to have that off my chest. You're not going to feel any better until you get this thing off your chest. You're right.